happy couple moving in together. A secret life of infidelity and drugs.
When I told her to get out of my house, I don't know where she went and stayed that night.
A joint bank account missing $100,000. A gun that's missing one bullet.
There was multiple firearms there, from handguns to rifles to shotguns.
Police don't know whether they're dealing with a desperate woman on the run.
And being a private investigator, people thought maybe she'd be able to disappear.
Or a very clever murder.
She pretty much vanished, just out of thin air.
The northwestern part of Florida, also known as the Florida Panhandle, is sometimes referred to as Florida's Emerald Coast because of the beautiful, clear green water. Its westernmost city, Pensacola, has a population of just over 50,000 people.
Pensacola is a vibrant city, home of the world-famous Blue Angels, world's widest beaches, downtown's picking up. It's real vibrant on the weekends. It's a great place to be.
Pensacola is a small, big town. The population's growing. We're growing up. We have a minor league baseball team, a minor league hockey team. College now has a football team that's won back-to-back college championships for their division. Yet, Pensacola is still that town where people open the door for you. And, you're 7 people away from knowing everybody in the town.
On September 14th, 2017, Cassandra Waller contacts the Pensacola Police Department and files a missing persons report on her girlfriend, Taylor Wright.
Cassandra called the police department. Hey, I haven't heard from Taylor in a long time. It's kind of weird.
So Cassandra Waller was Taylor Wright's girlfriend at the time.
They recently moved in together. They kind of took that next step, that next evolution that couples do of moving in together. So everything was moving forward. There were no issues at all. So for her to kind of up and vanish one day was weird.
Investigators try to learn everything they can about Taylor Wright.
We want to know the person that's missing. We want to know their background, any issues, their traits, because it might help us find them.
33-year-old Taylor Wright is a recently divorced mother.
Taylor was a private investigator at the time of her disappearance. She was currently going through the hiring process to be a police officer here at the Pensacola Police Department. And she had been a sworn law enforcement officer up in Jacksonville, North Carolina. From what we could gather, talking to friends and family, Taylor's son was the center of her life. She was a loving mother, a great friend, loved to be in the outdoors, just all around good person.
So Taylor, she was small, but she was mighty. When I spoke with her she said she had a zest for life. She was a force to be reckoned with, and someone who was very energetic and just happy to be around people. She would make friends with just about anyone she met.
Taylor is last seen wearing black sunglasses and a necklace with a bullet as a pendant.
The initial detective just started kind of working the case, but he always had this inclination something wasn't right. She pretty much vanished, just out of thin air.
Investigators bring Cassandra in for further questioning.
She may be the reporting person on a missing person case, but learning that they were involved in it's a relationship, they were moving in together. We need to get a interview of her where we're in control, like we are here at the police department, not at her house. So she voluntarily came to the police department and provided us with this interview. She was nervous. At one point, she began to cry during the interview, but appeared that she wanted us to find Taylor and make sure that she wasn't harmed.
The story of Taylor and Cassandra's relationship is slowly revealed. Cassandra meets Taylor through an online dating app in April of 2017.
It was a little bit of a rocky relationship. They had been dating for quite a few months. While that was happening, she did find out that there was some alleged drug use as well as another relationship continuing on, some infidelity still happening with, I believe it was a woman in Mississippi.
Whenever I found out about Taylor, kind of having this relationship that she didn't end with this other girl, and I told Taylor to get out of my life and everything, and she kept begging to text me, please just hear me out.
Taylor did have an affair with another female, and that was a concern to us, right? That would potentially give Cassandra a motive.
Taylor asks Cassandra to meet her at the home of her friends Ashley and Zach. Like Taylor, Zach is a former police officer who now works as a private investigator. Cassandra goes to Zach and Ashley's house to meet Taylor.
So I was like, so Taylor, what about cocaine? And Taylor said, she paused, and she was like, yeah, I've done it 3 times though. That's it. She goes, I swear you can test me whatever you want. It's not an addiction. She goes, I was going through a lot and I was fighting depression and I needed to just be up. She goes, I swear to God, any day you want. She goes, I'll buy the drug test. You can test me. Prior to that honesty night, I like how you call it that, there was a couple times when she wouldn't go to sleep. She'd stay up all night. And the first time we were in New Orleans, she had nosebleeds that night. But after honesty night, she was sleeping through the night, she was consistent, she was organized, she was focused, and that's why I decided to let her move into my house.
Taylor starts to move into Cassandra's house the weekend before she goes missing. On the morning of Friday, September 8th, 2017, Cassandra and Taylor are both preparing to leave the house.
She made me breakfast. She made me eggs and bacon and stuff, and she was in no hurry for anything. It was just a normal morning. She made me coffee.
Cassandra's off work until Tuesday, so she and Taylor are looking forward to spending some quality time together over the next 4 days. But Cassandra gets a text and agrees to go help with something for a couple of hours, which works out well because Taylor also has a morning plan.
On the morning of the 8th, her and Ashley were going to be going to a bank here in Pensacola to try to get some money that Taylor asked Ashley to hold on to.
It was a cashier's check in a safety deposit box.
Taylor and I, we were literally walking out to my car. Ashley pulled up, and I was like, hey, Ash. She goes, hey, Cass. And I was like, oh, have a good one. See you later. And she goes, all right. Literally got my car, and I left. So I left the house before they did.
Prior to about 11:30, 12 o'clock-ish, Taylor would respond to Cassandra's text messages. Then they kind of stopped. Cassandra was trying to get a hold of Taylor via text message and asking her, hey, where you at? What's going on? So Cassandra then began texting Ashley, trying to obtain, what's going on? Is everything okay?
She was like, Taylor's broke down and cried twice today. I'm like, what is going on? She won't reply back to me. That's not like Taylor.
So Ashley said that she picked Taylor up that morning. They drove around. They did some errands. Taylor seemed a little bit upset. So they went to a family farm up in Milton, Florida. Let Taylor ride the horses, just kind of, relax, decompress.
She was like, she's out riding the horse right now. We'll be home in a little bit. So that was about, I think, 3:30 or so.
Around 7 p.m., Cassandra texts Ashley again.
And Ashley's like, Ash, she left my house around 5:15-ish. She said that she was going to take an Uber, go get a drink. She needs to think about things. A little bit after that, like 7:58, Taylor sent me that text. And I'm mad at you. I should have called. I just need some time to think. I'm trying to get my life organized and back on track.
Cassandra sends a series of angry texts to Taylor, but gets no reply.
She was very emotional, very upset. She was very confused about the last text she had received, and then the radio silence she got from Taylor.
At like 11:54, 11:55, Ash texted me a screenshot of what Taylor just sent her. She's okay, I'm not doing anything bad. I'm just stressed out with the move in court, and I need a few days to myself.
She said it was just weird, but she respected her privacy, gave it a couple days, and when she hadn't heard anything and found out that Taylor hadn't contacted her son, that's where she got concerned, and that's where law enforcement came in.
As an ex-cop and a private investigator, Taylor has some skills that could help her if she wants to vanish. But why would she do that?
It's hard for someone to vanish. She had money in her bank account. When we went to Cassandra and Taylor's house and we looked through their bedroom, we found a check for thousands of dollars made out to Taylor's name. If I'm going to vanish, I'm going to take as much cash as I can. Why would I leave that? All of her personal hygiene items were there. Everything was there showing that she was going to come back to that house, not just vanish like she did.
Investigators find several things that raise questions, including Taylor's passport and a gun.
The firearm that I located was in a entertainment stand in Cassandra Waller's bedroom. The firearm was a 6-shot revolver, and when we opened up the cylinder, it only had 5 bullets in it.
What happened to the other bullet? Tourists flock to Pensacola, Florida, to enjoy white sand beaches that are ranked among the very best in the country. It hardly seems like the kind of place where a person could disappear. But on September 8th, 2017, Taylor Wright waves goodbye to her girlfriend, Cassandra Waller, and is never seen again. Police find a gun missing 1 bullet in Cassandra Waller's bedroom. But Cassandra has an explanation.
She had recently got the firearm because Ashley had told her that Taylor was going to be upset that she had gotten the police involved in her missing person case.
She let me borrow a revolver. Well, because I was afraid at first.
What revolver did she let you borrow?
It was a long one. It looked like a really old one. It was like in a big leather thing, but it said something on it. Like if I saw it again, I could tell you what it was. But she let me borrow that until I got my own gun.
Cassandra becomes emotional when detectives ask her some difficult questions.
Do you know who harmed Taylor?
No.
If you knew who harmed her, would you tell us?
Absolutely.
She was dead right now, would you tell us?
I don't know. She left.
Did you harm her?
I don't know.
After hours of interrogation, her story remains the same, and investigators send her home.
After talking to Cassandra, the next person we went and talked to was Ashley. She was the last person that Cassandra said was with Taylor. So, of course, we want to know what Ashley's interaction with Taylor was, being that last person. And did Taylor say something? Was she upset? Something along that line.
We went over to Ashley MacArthur's residence and basically interviewed her at her residence for a while. And Ashley allowed us to search her residence. The only thing we found there was a bunch of firearms. With her being in prior law enforcement, her husband being in prior law enforcement, being a private investigator, they're both avid hunters. There was multiple firearms there, from handguns to rifles to shotguns.
Ashley and her husband Zach tell investigators that Taylor is a heavy drug user and a liar.
We became friends because of me. We were both private investigators, and I just figured, from being a cop for so long, I knew something was up with her. She just seems like a bad manipulator, and she bothers me. I think she's a dangerous person.
Ashley confirms Cassandra's version of events on Friday, September 8th. She picks up Taylor just before 10 a.m., and they spend the day together. The last time Ashley sees her is around 5:15 p.m., when Taylor leaves to get an Uber and go somewhere for a drink.
I think she's probably just off acting like a nut. I mean, at first I was really worried about her, and I got really mad at her about it, but I think she's probably just playing people, because that's like, after hearing all this, all of this is a game to her.
Did she seem like she was acting any different than normal?
Not really. She was upset about this court case that she had going on, and really thought that her ex-husband was going to try to put her back in jail. He thought he was trying to ruin her career, put her back in jail, because she blames him for her not being a cop anymore.
Taylor and her ex-husband Jeff Wright have a history of trouble.
There was one incident where Taylor was over at Jeff's house, and this was in the midst of their very contentious divorce battle.
Taylor's ex-husband was telling Cass to immediately change her locks, to put bells or something on her windows, because I think he and Taylor had physical altercations.
Aside from the divorce and child custody battle, investigators learned that Taylor and her ex-husband have another reason to be at odds.
Taylor Wright had managed to take $100,000 out of a shared account despite a judge putting a freeze so that neither the ex-husband nor Taylor Wright could access it. However, Taylor found a way, accessed that money, took it from that joint account, and then hid it from him.
Taylor asks Ashley to keep some of it in her safety deposit box, and then picks it up on the day she goes missing. Investigators wonder if Taylor's gone into hiding to avoid Jeff, or if he could be responsible for her disappearance.
The motive for Jeff obviously would be there. There's $100,000 missing. There's an ongoing court case concerning that money that's missing. They've got this child they have joint custody of.
Investigators dig deeper into Jeffrey Wright and his relationship with Taylor. Taylor and Jeffrey Wright meet in 2003 while she's pursuing a degree in criminal justice. Jeffrey works for the Department of Defense. They get married and move to Jacksonville, North Carolina, where Taylor enters the police academy and is sworn in as an officer in 2008. They remain married for about 10 years and have one child together, but end up getting divorced in 2016. Following up on Ashley's statement, investigators ask Jeff Wright if Taylor is an addict.
In 2012, she was fired from a pain clinic, not working there, but as a patient, for irregularities pertaining to Percocet and stuff like that.
Jeff also says that Taylor has a lot of guns.
She was part of the I'm a big badass because I've got a 45 crowd. We talked her out of that eventually, and she started carrying 380.
He claims that Taylor is very concerned about money.
So we had a combined investment account that during the course of the marriage went from 300 down to 100. So when she sees that she's in danger of losing all this, on February 22nd of this year, she withdrew $100,000, put it in her own account.
So the judge had ordered her not to take that money out, and she was basically in trouble for doing so.
Taylor was getting all these court summons saying that she had to return this money to the courts so they could determine what percentage would be divided up amongst Jeff and Taylor.
Because of her failure to comply with the court order, Taylor is scheduled to appear at a contempt of court hearing on September 22nd. Taylor begs Jeff to call it off and let her keep the money. He refuses.
Taylor had been stressing out over the last several days because she had this upcoming court date where she had to present this money that was taken from her and Jeff Wright's account to the judge on that day, and there would be some kind of consequences.
Jeff is cleared of any suspicions when it's confirmed he is on a military base out of town at the time Taylor goes missing.
Some people thought because of what she was going through with her ex-husband, the custody battle, the money trouble, that maybe she had just gotten up, left, taken that money to start anew. And being a private investigator, people thought maybe she'd be able to disappear.
And her ex is convinced the the most likely person to help Taylor is also the last one to have seen her, Ashley MacArthur. On September 8th, 2017, Taylor Wright disappears without a trace. Taylor is facing contempt of court charges and has been ordered to return some money that she has taken from her ex-husband. Money she asked her friend Ashley MacArthur to hide. Ashley is an ex-CSI and runs her family's business, Pensacola Automatic Amusement, which supplies pool tables and pinball machines to bars and businesses. She's the last person known to have seen Taylor before she vanished. Investigators bring Ashley into the station to get a more detailed account of their final day together.
Ashley MacArthur said that she picked Taylor Wright up and they were going to run an errand. From there, she said that they were going to go to her family's farm in Milton and ride some horses because Taylor had had a rough day and she wanted some time to think and be alone and be with the animals. She wanted some time of peace. So that's what she told police, that she and Taylor went to her farm in Milton.
Y'all were out there for how long?
Probably maybe an hour.
Maybe an hour?
Yeah.
And then from there you went
Back to my house.
back to your place.
From there, she told them that Taylor wanted to go to a bar and have a drink and go out and just clear her mind. Now, Ashley said she would drive Taylor to the bar or downtown, wherever she wanted to go, but she says that Taylor insisted on getting an Uber. And that's the last time she says she saw her, is when she walked out to get that Uber.
So we contacted the various rideshare companies here, and none of them had any kind of information that they picked up from Ashley MacArthur's address or Taylor or anybody in the neighborhood. We also reached out to the various cab companies here in Pensacola, and we couldn't find anything to support that they had picked up from Ashley's residence or a Taylor Wright as well.
Investigators subpoena cell phone companies to get the records and track the movements of both Taylor and Ashley's cell phones. They determined that Ashley does not go to Milton, as she claims on September 8th. She goes to Cantonment, which is 35 miles to the west.
Once we started getting all the data in that we subpoenaed, we began to track Ashley's movements with the cell tower pings that were provided from her cell company. And we determined that Ashley was not 100% honest with us on her whereabouts on the 8th.
Taylor's cell phone is with Ashley in Cantonment, then later back at Ashley's house. Stranger than that, both phones ping in Robertsdale, Alabama on the evening of September 9th, a full day after Taylor's disappearance.
What we discovered was Ashley was attending a wedding out in Robertsdale for some of her friends who were deputies here in Escambia County. And Ashley and her husband are seen at the wedding, but no one actually recalls seeing Taylor at this wedding.
Ashley's phone also pings in the Cantonment area again on Saturday.
We need to figure out what she's doing up here and why she's spending all these hours up here that she never told us about. And we didn't want to call her at that time to alert her that, hey, there's an issue in your statement. So one of the other detectives said, why don't we try the property appraiser website? Okay, let's try that. So we had several different last names that Ashley had used, whether it be Ashley MacArthur, Ashley Britt. The first name we put into the property appraiser website was the last name Britt. And that search revealed that property on Britt Road. We put a pin drop on a map and then started inputting the data from the cell tower hits. And what we discovered was that property on Britt Road would have been encompassed in all the cell tower hit data that we had. So we thought we were definitely on the right track at this point.
On the day she disappears, Taylor tells Cassandra that she's on her way to Ashley's bank to get a $34,000 cashier's check out of her safety deposit box. Investigators contact the bank and find out that Ashley has no box there. They subpoena Ashley's bank records.
I could see on a day previous to Taylor's disappearance that a check for $34,000 had been deposited into one of Ashley's accounts. And then the following day, that money was dispersed amongst multiple accounts within the bank. She had a line of credit, a credit card, a personal bank account. We knew that close to the day that Taylor disappeared, that money was due. We learned that from Cassandra, and then eventually when we got the cell phone records back where she was talking to Ashley and asking for this money. And we could see communication going back and forth where Ashley was just basically saying, hey, I'm busy, I'm sorry, I'm stuck, I'll get with you tomorrow. Seeing those communications, plus knowing that the court was saying that this money was due, how important this money was to Taylor, and that Ashley no longer had that money, really concerned us at that point. That's when the investigation completely shifted from a missing person to a homicide investigation. We felt at that point that we were investigating a homicide.
It becomes clear that Ashley MacArthur is lying to investigators when they subpoena cell phone records showing Ashley and Taylor's phones are not at a farm in Milton on September 8th, but rather a farm in Cantonment, owned by Ashley's cousin, Kyle Britt. It's also clear from bank records that Ashley deposits Taylor's money into her own accounts. Upon examining the facts of the case, a judge grants search warrants for Ashley's residence, her business, and the farm up on Britt Road. But before they do anything, police must make sure to get Ashley and Zach out of their house.
The main reason we wanted to get them out of their residence was all the firearms they had. We did not want an armed confrontation when we go to execute the search warrant at their house. With the limited training she had as a crime scene tech, and with Zach being a ex-law enforcement officer, we just did not want any kind of confrontation where Ashley or Zach get hurt, one of us get hurt, or even an innocent bystander in the neighborhood get hurt. Detective Gigliotti and I reached out to Ashley and explained to her, hey, Ashley, we're done with your phone. Can you meet us here at the Pensacola Police Department tomorrow morning? And once we got her here at the police department and got her situated in one of the interview rooms, we let everybody know, hey, good to go, execute the search warrants.
While the search warrants are being executed, Ashley is interrogated.
Ashley's demeanor changed a lot from the first interview into this interview. She appeared to be not as confident in her answers when we are confronting her with, I guess, what we would consider the hard facts. She would answer softly.
What were y'all doing out there this farm? You know y'all there.
We picked up some stuff that Taylor had there
What was
that
it?
she had stored. Some kind of lockbox that she had.
Why would you not tell us that originally?
Because she asked me not to tell anyone.
You could see where she was trying to think about her answer, and knowing that we were probably going to counter her with what she's saying, another answer she was going to try to come up with after that answer.
Do you go back out to this farm after y'all leave?
To put her box up?
I'm asking you, do you go back out to the farm after y'all leave?
I don't think so.
She just appeared to be, again, a lot more nervous, not as confident in her answers, slow to answer the questions. In my opinion, telltale signs of, I got to come up with another lie to cover a lie.
Ask this. Why did you go back out to that farm on Brent Road the next morning?
Maybe to feed horses? I don't know.
During the interview, we were able to get her to confirm, yes, she was out at that farm on Brent Road with Taylor on the day of her disappearance, which was huge because she was able to place her and Taylor at the scene of the crime during the time frame that we have her out there via her cell phone pings.
Meanwhile, the search teams are still looking for any evidence of what happened to Taylor.
Detective Jeff Brown was the lead investigator out there at the scene of the Brent Road search warrant.
So looking at the farmhouse, if you were standing in front of it, you would see a small house that was on the property. Then they had a large horse barn area. There was a lake on this property, and the property stretched for a considerable amount of acres. Kind of on the perimeter of both sides of the property was a thick wooded line that was used for power poles and power companies. So, and it was in the middle of nowhere. There were, not a lot of houses around it, and it was far enough back that if you wanted to do something, no one would probably pay attention in that area. So prior to doing the search warrant, because of the size of the property, I knew I would need multiple investigators, multiple people to help search. I had also contacted Search and Rescue to get as many of their canines out as we could. So we had about 10 to 15 Search and Rescue canines and their handlers out there. I got officers from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission to help, the Escambia County Sheriff's Department, of course our agency. We had an ATV out there to kind of get around on the property. Because of the lake, I was concerned about that, so we actually had the Florida Fish and Wildlife bring a small boat that we could put out on the lake in case she was submerged. So it was a very large-scale search warrant. It was the largest one that I've ever done with multiple moving parts.
They located Kyle Britt inside the residence. They interviewed Kyle Britt, and then everybody began searching the property.
Again, our ultimate plan was hopefully we find Taylor somewhere on this property while Ashley's at the police department so they could arrest her there.
So you're the only one that was with her on this day at this farm that you did not disclose to us?
I didn't do anything.
You say she's at that farm, we're going to find her because we're executing the search warrant out there right now.
But she's not going to be there.
Then where's she at?
That's what she told police. She said, you're not going to find her out there.
So I would be texting the detectives that were interviewing Ashley. Hey, we haven't found anything yet. They would be, have any updates, and kind of the same. Has she confessed? Has she talked about where Taylor is? To kind of help us out because, again, it was a large parcel of land. And eventually they texted and said, she's decided to leave. She's gone.
When being pressed, Ashley ultimately ends the interview by requesting an attorney.
I think at this point I need an attorney because it seems to be that y'all think that I did something to her.
It seems like only seconds after Ashley leaves the police station that Sergeant Brown gets a call from some officers searching a wooded area near the horse barn.
They noticed what they thought was a human skull in a shallow grave.
A judge grants search warrants for Ashley MacArthur's residence, her business, and her cousin's farm on Britt Road. At the same time, they bring her in for questioning under the guise of returning her cell phone. She admits to being at the Britt Road farm with Taylor on the day she disappears. But when Ashley clams up and requests a lawyer, investigators have to let her go. Moments later, the search team on Britt Road make a shocking discovery: a human skull in a shallow grave.
I kind of moved some more of the brush aside, and I could clearly see, just from training experience and working multiple homicides and deaths, that it was a human skull. I called Detective Wilhite on the radio and just said, you got to call me. And he never answered. So I picked up my cell phone and I texted him, call me right now, ASAP. And within seconds, he called me back and it was, hey, I'm pretty sure we got her. At that point, we called out the medical examiner. So they came out and it was a slow process where they broke apart the concrete and the potting soil. It didn't cure correctly, so it wasn't as hard to get apart. They were able to break that apart. We did notice on the human skull, in the back of the skull, that there was a bullet hole. And then we also found a necklace that we knew Taylor had worn. It was a bullet necklace, so that's how we were able to positively confirm that was Taylor. From looking at everything and how that was the only sign of trauma that we could see, what we believed was Taylor was walking in front, Ashley walked behind her and shot her in the back of the head.
After speaking with the state attorney's office, we went ahead and took Ashley into custody for the murder of Taylor Wright.
On February 2nd, 2018, a judge grants a motion for pretrial release, and Ashley is released on a $400,000 bond.
That's like watching a killer just walk out.
Investigators dig deeper and discover that Ashley's business is under investigation for fraud, racketeering, and arson.
Her company supplied video game, dartboards, games like that to, either bars or restaurants kind of in town that you can play. And there was some allegations of fraud that she was not paying those businesses the percentage that they were due for having those equipment in their establishment.
At some point, the building caught on fire, and that was police's thought, that maybe she was trying to hide the evidence and get rid of any records.
I know from looking at the bank records that her business was not doing as good as she kind of portrayed it to be. A lot of times there were negative balances in the accounts that I could see from previous months. Power bills, things like that were past due. Again, once that $34,000 was deposited, a lot of those negative balances were turned positive.
Ashley MacArthur was charged with fraud, racketeering, and arson.
She was taken into custody at that time, and her bond for the homicide charge was revoked at that time as well.
She went to trial and was found guilty of the fraud and racketeering, but was not found guilty of the arson. But it did keep her in jail.
Aside from balancing her company's books with Taylor's $34,000, investigators notice Ashley using some of it to pay her husband's bills and the bills of another man.
She had a boyfriend named Brandon Beatty. She was paying some of his business bills.
I own a bar, and she comes in there and like she's friends with the bartenders and like people that come in there were all friends.
It was also learned that she had purchased him a boat and a motorcycle with some of the money that Taylor had asked her to hold on to.
The girl spends money on everybody around me.
Yeah.
Everybody. It's not uncommon for her to spend money on everybody.
We learned during that conversation she had bought or given him multiple guns.
While interviewing people at the bar that Brandon Beatty owns, investigators find a couple of employees who remember Ashley being there and asking some pretty strange questions.
She was talking about somebody she knew and how, like, she was a bad person and things would just be better if she wasn't around. And I kind of was like, what are you talking about? She's like, oh, you don't know her. Her name's Taylor. She said, well, how much coke do you think it would take for, like, somebody to overdose? And I was joking around. I said, probably like an 8-ball. I don't know. It was the day before she disappeared. Okay. Ashley always had a firearm in the car. And they were talking about how one night Audrey had shot it. And I was like, oh, well, I've never really shot a gun before. So we went outside and I shot whichever. I don't even know what the gun looked like now. I think it was black.
At some point during their evening together, Ashley and Audrey go to another bar where Ashley purchases an 8-ball of cocaine.
She made the comment that she was going to put it in Taylor's beer.
Investigators find video footage of Ashley buying a single beer on the day she's with Taylor.
We believe that Ashley mixed the cocaine into the beer, but more than likely Taylor didn't like it because it would have tasted sweeter. We believe that that was her first attempt to kill her, was to make it look like an overdose.
On August 26, 2019, the trial of Ashley Britt MacArthur begins.
The murder trial had garnered a lot of attention. I mean, this was a big case just due to the circumstances, the twists and turns, and the fact that we had several former law enforcement officers involved in this case. Ashley MacArthur's defense tried to claim that there wasn't going to be a shred of physical evidence to tie their client to the murder of Taylor Wright. However, the prosecution said, you don't need physical evidence because what we'll do for you is we will connect the dots.
The medical examiner testifies about performing an autopsy on Taylor Wright, and her findings paint a picture of Taylor's final moments. There is a perfectly round entrance wound on the back of Taylor's skull, which means that her assailant is standing or walking behind her when they pull the trigger. The bullet enters Taylor's skull at the back. The bullet doesn't have enough force to exit Taylor's skull, but it tries to stop at the top near the front, where it gets stuck. The bullet is from the .38 caliber class of firearm. Ashley MacArthur owns guns of this type, but there are many different makes and models available. Unfortunately, the bullet is too damaged and corroded to narrow down the identification any further. It's impossible to say which specific gun fired it. Taylor's body is found buried under potting soil and concrete, and the prosecution presents video surveillance footage of Ashley buying potting soil and concrete on Saturday, September 9th, the day after Taylor's disappearance.
The prosecutor did a fantastic job of presenting the evidence. because it was all circumstantial. There was no DNA evidence placing Ashley out at the farm. The only thing we had placing her at the farm was her statement and the cell phone data. There was no ballistics data that we could show. There was no way to link Ashley to a gun. We had a bunch of circumstantial evidence, the bank records and the cell phone records, and a little bit of I wouldn't even call it confession, and just an acknowledgement that she was out at the farm on the day that we believe the homicide took place.
The evidence may be circumstantial, but it all seems to add up to Ashley standing behind Taylor and pulling the trigger.
I know it's silent in a courtroom most of the time, but this silence, you could feel the tension from her family members, from her loved ones. It was just a very kind of eerie moment as we waited for the verdict to be read.
On August 30th, 2019, after 2 hours of deliberation, the jury finds Ashley Britt MacArthur guilty of first-degree murder. She is sentenced to the mandatory 25 years to life in prison.
I think the family and loved ones were as content as they can be, knowing that Ashley would be held responsible, but that's not going to bring Taylor back.
The final verdict was she was found guilty and she was sentenced to life in prison, which was a great relief off of our chest to get closure to Taylor's family, and we were actually able to return Taylor back to her family. Even though her son is going to live without her mother, there at least is some closure there that we were able to help provide.
A torrid affair conducted in secret. A gun makes its way into the wrong hands.
The evidence so far is scanty. There's no unusual fingerprints, no muddy footprints, and no murder weapon.
A .40 caliber farewell that resonates through the streets and homes of a quiet Midwestern city.
This is one of those cases that was unusual. It was all hands on deck.
And a mystery that will consume the authorities and the public alike until a series of shocking revelations finally see the light of day. Independence, Missouri, just to the east of Kansas City. It's a Midwestern town through and through, if largely a suburb of its bigger neighbor.
It's about a quarter of the size, and they don't have a lot of violent crime. In fact, they average about 9 homicides a year.
But many of the residents like to pack a little something extra, just in case. Indeed, Missouri ranks 20th in the U.S. for gun ownership, and nearly half of its 6 million residents are in possession of some kind of firearm. Randy Stone, a 42-year-old insurance agent and Marine veteran, is one of them. It's the afternoon of March 31st, 2010. Randy Stone is in his insurance office. Whether he knows it or not, he isn't alone there today. Randy Stone's wife, Teresa, discovers his body at around 5 o'clock that afternoon.
And she tells police that she gets to their small storefront insurance office where they shared this office together and noticed that the blinds were drawn. And she said that that was odd. The deadbolt was open. She told police that was unusual. She goes inside. All of the lights are off.
I yell. I say, honey, where are you? And I walk into his office and I turn the light on. And, you know, the computer's up. Everything looks fine. I walk into the back room back there and turn the light on. And he's not back there.
Which room is that? The storage?
The storage room, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Then I walk around the corner.
To your office? What do you see?
Walks into her office and finds him dead on the floor.
What did you do once you saw him there?
I kept yelling for him to wake up.
Did you shake him?
I didn't touch him.
Okay.
Police headquarters is a 7-minute drive from the office, so responders are on the scene very quickly.
Investigators know they have to find out as much as they can about Randy's life in order to discover who has ended it.
So we know that Randy and Teresa were high school sweethearts. By all accounts, very popular, joined at the hip kind of situation, and everyone kind of assumed right after high school they would get married. Turns out Randy had a different idea. He wanted to join the military and went and did so. Randy was a Marine, and as soon as he got back from his service, sure enough, he and Teresa became husband and wife.
To the Stones, Independence seems an ideal place to raise a family, and they soon have 2 growing children.
Randy and Teresa Stone have separate interests, as couples often will.
Randy enjoys sports like basketball, and he likes his guns as well. He often goes to his in-laws' property to target shoot, while Teresa raises the children and runs the household.
She appears content to take on all the duties required to keep a family going.
But of course, everyone needs some form of leisure. For Teresa, it seems to be shopping.
Psychologists have established that shopping functions not only as leisure, but also as a way for a person to regain a feeling of control over their lives and to reduce anxiety. We don't know exactly what Teresa is undergoing emotionally in this period, but we know how stressful managing a household can be.
While Randy and Teresa frequently do their own things, they share interests as well. These largely revolve around the New Hope Baptist Church.
It's one of those churches that was described as a very, very close-knit congregation. They shared meals together. It was not unusual for people to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 days or nights a week at this congregation. And Randy and Teresa were incredibly involved.
This level of involvement in the church, especially a church in the Southern Baptist tradition, brings with it a commitment that is nearly total. Randy and Teresa Stone took the idea of serving very literally. The Southern Baptist Convention was created in 1845 when there was a split with the larger Baptist Church over slavery. The profound conservatism of the movement appeals to heartland people like the Stones, and that the convention allowed individual churches to set their own doctrinal degree appeals in particular to Randy.
Randy volunteers with church treasury work and keeps a close eye on the books.
He was heavily involved in the church finances. As treasurer, he served on the board.
And he teaches Sunday school, where he shares his faith with the children of New Hope.
Teresa sings in the choir and frequently works in the kitchen during church events. By the time they are in their early 40s, their children are nearly grown and in school. With involvement in the church naturally comes involvement with its pastor, Brother David Love, who arrives there in 1999. Randy and Teresa become close friends with both Brother Love and his wife, Kim.
Pastor Love was a good-looking guy, very charismatic, very energetic. Everyone loved Pastor Love.
A congregation's perception of pastoral humility and honesty has been found to be a strong predictor of its commitment to the church, especially in smaller churches like the New Hope Baptist Church in Independence. So it's very important that Pastor Love encourages such a perception, and in this he certainly succeeds. And Randy and Teresa Stone feel lucky to have such a man as the head of their church.
It was just a very, very close-knit church community, and Randy and Pastor Love, by all accounts, were what you would consider best friends.
The couple also spends time together at the insurance office, where each has an office of their own.
When couples work together day in and day out, it isn't always a good thing for the marriage, but in this case, it seems to be fairly harmonious.
Not a lot of people can get along great working a few feet from their spouse every day, but they did it, and by all accounts, it seemed to work out just great for the two of them.
The only work-related problem that Teresa reports to investigators involves a strange man who came to the office once when both Teresa and Randy were working, and then another time when only Randy was there.
My husband said he came back once when he was there by himself.
You know who this guy is?
No, we have never seen him
How long
before.
ago was this?
I don't even remember what he was asking for.
Did he look homeless or anything? Or?
Yes, he did. The time he came in, it was very cold because he had on a very heavy coat. I think he had a mustache. He was pretty tall.
Though he never made any specific threats, the Stones consider this man an unwelcome and potentially dangerous presence.
Has this man come into the office a third and final time on this fateful March 31st? Police must find out. After such an encounter, Randy takes it upon himself to have some sort of defense in the building.
What guns do you know that he had here at the office or anywhere?
The only one that I know of that he has was a little bitty thing.
Black gun?
Yes.
That's what you said earlier.
Little bitty thing. It's little.
Where do you keep it?
And I don't even like touching it. I am pretty positive he kept it in the drawer at the back of his credenza.
Unfortunately, on March 31st, 2010, Randy is found dead and defenseless on the floor of his office by his wife, Teresa.
The first officer on the scene happens to be from New Hope Baptist Church, and he knows Randy and Teresa very well. He's stunned by what he finds and does his best to comfort Teresa.
Pastor Love and his wife Kim arrive at the scene of the crime as soon as they hear what has happened. Any concerned church leader would do the same thing. And of course, Teresa's mom and dad, the first people she's called upon discovering Randy's body, get there as soon as they can.
Of course, the uppermost question in everybody's mind is who could have done this? Who would have wanted a stand-up guy like Randy Stone dead?
He hasn't had an affair with someone.
Several years ago, he did.
Randy was killed not by a stranger, but by someone he knew.
One of the biggest pieces of evidence was in a trash can a couple of feet from Randy Stone's body.
The murder of Randy Stone shocks the suburban town of Independence, Missouri. Randy and Teresa Stone, married almost 20 years, are apparently as happy and God-fearing a couple as you might ever meet. One horrible afternoon, Teresa Stone's life changes forever when she finds the body of her husband slumped on the floor of her own office.
And I noticed he wasn't breathing, but I didn't want to touch him. I was
That's fine.
scared.
One of the things police ruled out immediately was suicide. There was no gun found at the scene.
In fact, police do find a gun at the scene, but it's Randy Stone's work gun, and it hasn't been fired.
And you said he has one small gun. Okay, we found that.
You did?
Yes. No other guns?
No.
Okay.
They also find a hunting knife, but it too has no connection to the crime.
Police rule out robbery as a motive because there's money left on a desk in the office.
Randy Stone also had his wallet in his back pocket. So a robbery seemed out of the question.
Given the position of the body, it seems evident that Randy was killed not by a stranger, but by someone he knew.
They thought from the beginning that whoever killed Randy Stone was probably someone that he knew. They just didn't know who.
But evidence so far is scanty. There's no unusual fingerprints, no muddy footprints, and no murder weapon. But what police do find is a shell casing lying on the ground near Randy Stone's body. And with a little forensic work, a shell casing can tell you a lot.
It appeared Randy had been shot with a .40 caliber.
During their investigation, police check the phone in Randy's office and find something interesting.
Early in the investigation, police learn that the first number that Teresa Stone dialed after finding her husband's body was not 911. It was her parents. They tell her to call the emergency number, and she does, but the question remains, why didn't she call an ambulance right off the bat?
Of course, in a stressful situation, a person might behave in ways that seem odd later on, but it did raise a small flag.
Detectives delve deep into their 8-hour interview with Teresa Stone, and cracks in the facade of her marriage appear quickly.
No affairs on the side or anything like that?
No.
He hasn't had an affair with someone? And just be honest.
Several years ago, he did.
Okay.
But that was right after we got married.
Okay.
That was a long time ago.
And it didn't cause any friction that
No.
you guys were wanting to get separated?
No,
or
no.
You never had to leave the residence or anything? No one left the residence or anything?
No, never.
Investigators collect every instance of conflict Randy Stone has in his life, but there aren't many.
Randy Stone had been keeping the books for New Hope. And early in Pastor Love's tenure there, Randy discovers $30,000 missing from a missionary fund.
He was upset about the finances and the way that the finances were being handled. And that was no secret.
Pastor Love is asked to account for it, but angrily denies any wrongdoing. It must have been difficult for Randy to bring it up in the first place, given how much admiration and respect he had for the pastor. And soon, Randy's trust in Pastor Love is regained to the point of having him counsel the Stones when their marriage runs into trouble. That's the sort of person Randy is, a religious man inclined to forgiveness.
Well-liked as he is, Randy Stone's funeral is a crowded affair. Friends, family, clients, and well-wishers. And there are a number of additional guests as well.
That day, members of the Independence Police Department were in that church, and they recorded the stirring, beautiful eulogy delivered by Pastor David Love.
You see, there's nothing more that we can do for Randy Stone. Nothing more we can do for him. He'll never have another thought in this body, another emotion, another hunger, pain. He'll never be able to sign another policy or kiss his wife on this side of glory. Randy Stone's name was on the sign over his office, Randy Stone Insurance Agency. How many here really know that Teresa was the agent of that place? She was the cement and the glue, wasn't she?
At that point, they weren't sure who was involved in the murder, but they thought it was likely that the murderer would be inside that church. And of course, it turns out they were right.
But everyone Randy Stone knows is in the church today. So who is the killer?
Investigators don't yet know who killed Randy Stone, but when the ballistic reports come in, they at least know what type of gun killed him.
It appeared Randy had been shot with a .40 caliber. The casings from the gun were on the floor, and those were collected as evidence.
Investigators know that Randy Stone likes to target shoot, and they also know how statistically likely it is for someone to be shot with their own gun. So a trip to one of Randy's target shooting ranges seems warranted.
They were able to take some shell casings from one of the shooting ranges that he frequented, and those shell casings from his gun matched the casings at the scene where he was shot and killed.
Spent bullets and casings are as individual as your fingerprint. They're compared under a split-screen microscope by forensic experts to determine whether they came from the same gun.
It turns out those shell casings ended up matching Randy Stone's own .40 caliber weapon.
We know that Randy was killed with his own Glock. We went out to your house, or your parents' house, and got shell casings, okay? From when he used to target shoot.
The discovery that Randy Stone was killed with his own firearm raises a number of critical questions and gives the investigation an intensely new focus.
So how does Randy Stone come to be shot with his own gun? This is a key question in the investigation. An entire prosecution will rest on it.
You have to remember, Randy Stone was a Marine. He was also a gun enthusiast, and everyone around him said he never, ever would have turned his back on anyone in that office that he felt was a threat. It wasn't in his nature. He was a Marine.
I want to know how anybody could get into that office, get that Glock, and shoot your husband. Because we're talking about the former war guy, the Marine. How would anybody get that gun away from me?
I don't know. I have no idea. I keep asking myself that all the time.
Marines follow very strict code on firearms handling. During training, there's a very strong emphasis on marksmanship and weapons handling. They practice weapons handling and dry firing for weeks before they ever shoot a live round. They're taught to secure their weapon, to always know where their weapon is, and to never turn their back on someone who might be their enemy. You get that training like Randy Stone did, and you have it for life.
The man who killed your husband had the gun already. There's no way you could have got that gun away from your husband.
Investigators now discover a new piece of evidence that sends the case ricocheting into yet another surprising direction.
One of the biggest pieces of evidence was in a trash can a couple of feet from Randy Stone's body.
Ex-Marine and insurance agent Randy Stone is murdered in a case that has all of Independence, Missouri abuzz. And although the gun that kills Randy has disappeared, ballistic evidence indicates that the weapon has been owned by Randy himself. Now, newly discovered evidence is about to turn the case on its head.
So detectives, as they're going through the office looking for evidence, look in the trash can feet away from where Randy Stone lies dead. And in that trash can, they find a discarded love letter. And it wasn't crumpled up. There really wasn't even any real attempt to destroy this letter. It was in about 9 pieces. It took some Scotch tape to put the letter back together. This was very clearly a love letter from someone to Teresa Stone.
Initially, in speaking to detectives, Teresa had admitted that her husband had engaged in extramarital affairs. Teresa's urge to highlight her husband's wrongdoing is in fact a common prelude to confessing her own indiscretions. She has to build that little mound of moral high ground before exposing herself. There's no doubt that Teresa is committed to her Christian faith, that she's earnestly dedicated to the church. But human nature is such that the lineaments of dedication, of loyalty, of love can become blurred, and this is part of what happens to Teresa.
Police, over several hours of interrogations of Teresa Stone, finally start getting her to admit that this was more than just a secret admirer, that in fact she had a 10-year love affair with Pastor David Love.
Your extramarital relationship with David lasted about 10 years.
Yeah.
During
it got stronger as the years went on.
Okay. So it started off as a what type
just
of
like,
relationship?
you know, close friends, good friends,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Then it grew to what?
Sexual love.
Love. So you guys fell in love.
Yeah.
So we now know this was not an affair that lasted 6 months or a year. They had been seeing each other for almost 10 years.
Where would you guys normally meet when you guys were going to be sexually involved?
Well, we never planned it. When we were deeply involved, I mean, of course I would call you when Randy would leave, you know, and if I knew he was going to be gone for, you know, an hour, then he would come to the office if it was convenient for him.
So we're talking your office?
Yeah.
Farmers?
Mm-hmm.
Your home?
Yes.
His home?
Twice. It was harder there.
In his office? The church?
Yes.
Kim Love notices her husband receiving texts on unfamiliar-looking phones. Her suspicions are aroused, and she soon finds her suspicions are justified.
It turns out Kim, the pastor's wife, found several burner phones in their home. The kind of phones that don't have a name attached to them, the kind of phones that are very difficult to trace. And she didn't just find one phone. She found multiple phones in the home. And those phones we now know were used between Pastor Love and Teresa Stone to conceal their 10-year affair.
Teresa claims that matters come to a head about 2 weeks before the murder on St. Patrick's Day, when David Love and his wife show up at the office.
Pastor walked in, and Randy said, "Pastor, I really don't have anything to say to you. I really don't."
This is when the secrets come out. There's no doubt about the affair between Teresa and David. And now, David Love wants to talk about Randy's own past indiscretions with other women, and more recently, with pornography.
He starts talking to him about his internet problem, his pornography problem, stuff like that. And Randy said, "That's all behind us. We've gotten over that."
This is all stuff he and the Stones had talked about in their counseling sessions. And to bring it up now just compounds the betrayal. Kim Love, who has long suspected her husband, is just plain angry.
Didn't you and the wife have words up?
Yeah. I told her that she wasn't a very good wife, pastor's wife.
Investigators soon uncover more of Teresa's strange activity on the day of the murder.
And one of the admissions that investigators gently pry from Teresa is that after the discovery of Randy's body, she went to the bathroom of a local rental car agency and destroyed the burner phone that Pastor Love had given her.
After you found your husband, you left the crime scene to go to the bathroom, and while you were there, you destroyed a phone. You know what that looks like?
I know.
How are we going to explain that?
Not the actions of a completely innocent person.
On the day after Randy's murder, Teresa has a conversation that strikes investigators as strange.
Detectives knew that she had been asking a lot of questions about Randy Stone's life insurance policies. Even in the day after her husband's murder, she was asking about the life insurance policies, which seemed very odd for a grieving widow less than 24 hours after her husband's death.
Pastor Love's behavior had been odd as well. The very day after Randy Stone's body was found, the pastor gets a call from an old friend who asks him how he's holding up after the death of a friend and congregant. Like a river glorious, David Love says, quoting the title of an old and cherished hymn. In interviews, detectives repeatedly refer to the idea of confession being good for the soul. They know that, say, in Catholic culture, confession occurs in a small chamber in virtual secret, while other strains of Christian belief, including Teresa's, hold that confession, like faith itself, ought to be shouted from the rooftops. But Teresa's faith has been exploited by Pastor Love.
He kept throwing Bible verses up at me, and what other Bible characters did in the Bible, and how they murdered and God still blessed them and stuff like that. And I was like, and I kept telling him, I'm like, that was then. This is now.
And in the interrogation room, Teresa Stone is finally circling closer to the truth.
You told your parents specifically that Randy had been shot. You told the 911 operator you think he might have fallen. You never told him that he had been shot. You kept that to yourself. When you talked to the ambulance dispatcher, the person who needs to know what's going on there medically, you never told him that he'd been shot. Somebody told you that he was shot because you knew he'd been shot. And you didn't want us to know that.
He sent me a text and told me.
Who did? Say it. Brother Love.
He sent me a text and told me not to go to the office.
Teresa finally recognizes this man for what he is.
He said that he would kill for me. He said, I will do anything for you.
Police have no shortage of questions for Teresa Stone. Why had she destroyed her phone the night of the murder? Why had she been so concerned with Randy's life insurance? And why hadn't she called police immediately on learning what David Love had done? But for now, Teresa is happy to incriminate David Love while maintaining her own innocence.
I am not going to protect him anymore.
Finally, investigators have something close to confirmation of the killer's identity. But their suspect, it turns out, has left town.
Randy Stone had his suspicions about his own wife.
They learned the shocking lengths to which Pastor Love was willing to go.
It's no wonder that Randy never saw it coming.
A mysterious murder rocks a Missouri town, but the sordid story behind it is even more shocking.
If you know something and you don't confess now, I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to get through this.
A bereaved wife tells part of what she knows.
When I was on my way back to the office, after I dropped Miranda off at the house, he sent me a text and told me, he said, seriously urgent, do not go back to the office by yourself.
Randy Stone and David Love were friends. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that at least at one time, Randy considered Pastor Love his best friend. It's no wonder that Randy never saw it coming.
He said he walked to the office and he just aimed and didn't even look.
He said he did that?
That's what he told me.
So he said he pulled the trigger?
He said he just aimed and didn't even look. He just did it.
The detective's suspicions about David Love are now nearly confirmed after many slow and grueling hours in the interrogation room.
I've always thought of him as an honest man.
Well, you know he's not an honest man because he's had an affair with one of his congregation members for almost 10 years.
And with the confirmation of Love's guilt, even experienced detectives are stunned at the depth of the pastor's betrayal of his friend, his church, and his God.
We looked at this casket, and the body here, and all the flowers, the things gathered around, we say, but we anticipated he would grow old. We anticipated that we'd do more things together. What's with the word anticipation and death being swallowed up in victory? How could this be good at all?
Investigators are happy to finally hear Teresa confess what David Love told her, but there's still a lot left to confirm. What part did Teresa herself play in the crime? Where exactly is the gun that killed Randy Stone? And where is Love, who no longer seems to be at the church or even living in Independence?
Teresa Stone finally admits that, according to Pastor Love, he drives the gun 20 miles out of town and throws it where nobody will ever find it. And nobody ever does.
He told you he was taking the gun 20 miles away?
That's what he told me.
He was going to take it? Did he tell you where?
No, he said he took it 20 miles away.
And as it turns out, David Love himself, along with his wife Kim, has moved to another state, where the former pastor is working as a truck driver.
The lead detective travels to South Carolina with another officer, and they have David Love's supervisor call him into the office, supposedly to sign some paperwork.
Much of David Love's behavior indicates some degree of narcissistic personality disorder, so it's no surprise he doesn't expect to be tracked down in this way. Finding detectives waiting for him in the depot office is a total surprise to him.
Immediately after seeing the officers, Pastor Love appears to turn and flee, and officers give chase.
Detectives have seen this kind of reaction from suspects before. If they have any doubt of David Love's guilt, his behavior today dispels it.
As it turns out, however, Pastor Love is not attempting to flee. He just wanted to pick up his wife so their car wouldn't be left behind at the depot when he went away with the police. Pastor Love is returned to Missouri without further incident.
Meanwhile, Teresa's strategy throughout her interrogations is to minimize her own involvement by stressing things she truly hadn't done, while trying to rhetorically ignore the actual questions detectives are asking. This is a common strategy learned by most people in childhood, and Teresa, it turns out, is very good at answering questions the detectives aren't asking.
This whole line of questioning just seems to make you very uncomfortable.
In the interviews, she constantly speaks about how much she hates guns, even though no one has accused her of pulling the trigger.
questions about the guns when we talk about guns? I mean, you seem to be very uncomfortable when we talk about it.
I don't like them. I don't like to talk about them. I don't like guns. I don't like to touch them.
Having committed to blaming her former lover, Teresa goes all in, hoping that once he's been fed whole to the detectives, they'll be satisfied. But if that's what she thinks, she doesn't know homicide detectives.
A brutal murder in Middle America. Irrefutable evidence that what may start as the most heartfelt of emotions can curdle into the most heartless of crimes and become a startling saga of sin and secrecy, leading to an investigation and a capture, but with one essential angle still unconfirmed.
So at this point, police know all about the affair, and now Teresa Stone knows that they know about the affair. But what they didn't have was that final piece of the puzzle connecting Teresa Stone directly to the murder.
The key now is to get Teresa to admit that she helped Love access the weapon, which makes her an accessory to her husband's murder, if not the instigator of it.
The man who killed your husband had the gun already. There's no way you could have got that gun away from your husband. The gun was passed off to him is what I'm trying to tell you. Only you would have been able to do that.
No, I don't touch guns. I don't like them.
At this point, it doesn't matter how much Teresa insists she didn't ever touch guns. With David Love on his way in for his own interrogation, police have a powerful lever with which to pry the last few secrets out of her.
I think Brother Love is going to break down like a cheap shotgun. I think he is going to spill his guts in about record time. I would bet 30 minutes. And he will tell us everything he knows.
David Love is brought in and interrogated by investigators.
If you want to invoke your right to an attorney and not answer any of my questions, that's your right. That's your right to do that.
I feel like I have to because I don't know why wouldn't I have an attorney because I don't know what I'm facing.
With Brother Love in the building for questioning, the detectives use this to press Teresa even more.
David's in custody and he's talking. Okay? Right now is your chance, and you probably have about 10 minutes to tell us everything that's going on with this. When did David get the gun? That's the most important thing right now. How did he get his hands on Randy's gun?
I don't know.
That's the question I need to answer.
I don't know.
Why don't you know, Teresa?
I
Do you not want to tell me? Do you think it implicates you if you say, I made the gun available to him, I didn't know what he was going to do. I had no idea David was going to shoot Randy. I made sure he got the gun, though. You didn't make him go in there and pull that trigger. But you provided him the means of doing it.
I did not give him the gun.
You gave him access to Randy's gun.
The only thing that I can think of is that he went in our house while we were not at home and got in the safe and got the gun.
David Love has access to your house?
I am trying to be honest.
You don't have to try to be, Teresa. You know more
I
than...
am being honest.
Teresa, you know more than you've told them.
No, I don't.
They know more than you're telling them.
She soon admits that she has, in fact, given Brother Love the combination needed to open Randy Stone's gun safe.
He had the combination to the safe.
And you gave it to him?
Well, I was down there one time with him when I was getting into it.
When you were getting into the safe?
Yeah.
So you gave him the combination to the safe?
Well, he watched me open it, so yeah, I guess I did.
He was standing right there while you were opening the safe? Mm-hmm. So you gave him the combination to the safe? Pretty much.
Yeah.
Teresa Stone may not have pulled the trigger, but providing the gun is textbook conspiracy to murder behavior. And from Teresa, they learn the shocking lengths to which Pastor Love was willing to go. Apparently, he had plans for his wife, Kim.
First time he talked about it is he said that he wished he could just break her neck and put her in her car and send her over a cliff. He said one time when they were out on a trip that he thought about rolling his car and trying to make it look like, you know, her neck broke in
the rolling of the car or something like that.
The more investigators look into the weeks leading up to Randy Stone's murder, the more obvious the killer's motive becomes.
One of the things police found on Randy Stone's computer in the days prior to his murder, he told Pastor David Love they were severing all ties with the church. And it was a final email. In fact, he said something to the effect in one of the final emails to Pastor David Love, "You don't need to contact me about this." The emails were really concrete evidence that he was stepping away completely from that church. And of course, his wife, Teresa Stone, didn't want any of that to happen. She was in love with Pastor Love.
And this is not the only motive that lingers with investigators.
One of the bizarre aspects of this case is Teresa's just insistence on learning more about this life insurance policy. And even within 24 hours of the murder, she's asking a friend about the life insurance. And he thought that was odd. He looks into it and says to her, "Did you not know? Your husband moved you off of those policies quite a while back. He actually removed you as the beneficiary and added the 2 children as the beneficiaries to that life insurance." And prosecutors argued this goes to show you that Randy Stone had his suspicions about his own wife by removing her from that life insurance and not even telling her. They worked at a life insurance office together.
Investigators finally have the case wrapped up. Now the wheels of justice begin to grind.
Despite the fact that this was one of the biggest cases in Independence police history, there was no splashy trial here. Pastor David Love was offered a plea and for quite some time rejected the plea deal. Wasn't going to do it. And then finally toward the end, they both knew that police had them. They knew. And Pastor David Love agreed to admit to his role in this crime. He stood up in open court. The judge asked him, "Did you knowingly shoot and kill Randy Stone?" And Pastor Love replied, "Yes." Pastor Love took the plea, was sentenced to life in prison, where he sits to this day.
With David Love put away for life, the beam of justice turns on Teresa Stone. Teresa weeps and tells the court how sorry she is to have been, as she puts it, quote, "caught up in these bad choices that led to the death of my husband."
In a development that surprises some, Teresa and Randy's children plead for mercy for their mother, despite understanding very well what she's done. Her son Michael also laments the bad choices his mother's made, while daughter Miranda tells the judge that as hard as it is to lose her father, to lose her mother also will be even harder.
Despite the pleas of the children, Teresa Stone is in fact sentenced to prison time.
And you have to remember, without Teresa Stone, there is no murder of Randy Stone. She provided the motive, the gun, the fake alibis. Without Teresa, none of this happens. She serves 8 years and is walking free today.
And so, Teresa Stone, who in the end admits to prosecutors that she sent a text explicitly asking David Love to kill her husband, wins her parole after serving just over half her sentence. Phoenix, Arizona, 2005. The busy western city is getting ready for another summer of fun.
It was too damn hot. And then we had 2 little stories that made it a whole lot hotter.
It starts out horrific and just keeps getting worse.
These were bizarre incidents. People were terrified.
Bodies are hitting the ground again and again. Every day is a nightmare. nobody knows who's safe.
I think everybody, including the cops, were a little blown away.
They shoot dogs, they shoot horses. Any living, breathing creature is fair game. And now they think there's more than one. That's just a start.
Phoenix, the capital and most populous city in the state of Arizona. The city is nestled in the northeastern reaches of the Sonoran Desert, but that hasn't deterred anyone from flocking here.
They call it the Valley of the Sun, and it encompasses about a half dozen cities, and you wouldn't know if you were in one or the other one unless you lived there. They all sprawl together.
In 2005, the locals find themselves fearing for their lives.
I think there was some period of time where we sort of this growing apprehension that this is going exactly where we all think it's going. And it's really bad.
In the nearby suburb of Tolleson, home to almost 5,000 residents, a dark presence is lurking. A presence ready and willing to take an innocent life. At first, it's random dog shootings. Then, they shoot a horse. Police don't know what to make of the animals being shot at for no reason.
So this little tiny town adjacent to Phoenix has a lot of horse properties and is basically kind of a rodeo town. And someone started shooting the horses that lived in people's front yards and in their backyards.
A horse is gunned down by a .22 caliber rifle. Police must uncover if this is a random attack or part of a bigger scheme if they hope to find the shooter.
These random shootings are taking place, and it's even more unnerving to know that they were animals. Why would somebody do this?
And don't forget, there was also different jurisdictions. So it's hard to see the big picture if you only have one or two cases.
Just these random dogs and horses that were just outside. They were easy targets.
But as the moon appears in the night sky, a dark and unnerving night is only beginning. Later that same night, things escalate.
David Estrada was a beloved young man. He had a mother who doted on him and several sisters who treated him like the pet of the family. He was musical and he was bright and he was movie star handsome. He was struggling to find his way as he approached adulthood. He left home and was living on the streets with his guitar and had a goal to make it to California, San Francisco. David was not an untethered person. He had people who wanted to take care of him. But David was following the beat of his own path and happened to be on a sidewalk that night, sleeping under the stars, something he liked to do.
Estrada has set up camp outside a bus stop nearby, and he sees a car slowly creeping up.
And someone drove up alongside him and shot him.
It's just an act of sheer cowardice on the shooter's part. Estrada was gunned down in cold blood. If it's indeed the same shooter, they've stepped up their game. You know, shooting a random horse is one thing, but killing a person randomly at a bus stop is on a whole nother level. It's almost as if the shooter was trying to get up the nerve to kill a person by shooting the horse first.
Detective Ron Rock from the Tolleson Police Department came to the murder scene of David Estrada that night, and there was change on the sidewalk next to him, money. There was a nice quality guitar nearby. So he looked at this and said, this isn't a robbery. This is not someone who came up to him and said, give me all your money or take all your valuables. So Ron Rock, to his credit, knew there was something distinct about this murder.
Well, it appears as though they drove up and offered him some change and then shot him in the face. But there's no indication or no clue as to why they did this.
Officers make a critical discovery. Bullet slugs from inside the victim. The slugs are sent to the police crime lab for further analysis.
And it was, devastating to come outside in the morning and find your horse bleeding or lying on the ground dead. But these seemed isolated because it didn't have anything to do with Phoenix. It seemed like a small town case. There was a Burger King that got shot out, a murder on a sidewalk somewhere that seemed puzzling, but no one was connecting the dots.
Police discovered that the .22 caliber bullet casings that were found at the scenes where the horses and dogs were shot came from the same gun responsible for the killing of David Estrada. A profile is beginning to emerge, but will it hold up?
Exotic dancer Georgia Thompson is walking through her apartment parking lot after a late-night shift. She hears someone behind and yells at them to leave her alone, but is shot dead at point-blank range with the .38 caliber handgun. Police are perplexed. Are these crimes connected? When they look at what's happening in the city, they realize that just a few weeks earlier, a sexual assault occurs in the same area.
They were walking home, forced these two young women behind some bushes, made them undress. One of the young women was visibly pregnant.
Then, a week later, there is another sexual assault, but this one combined with a robbery. Police question locals to see if anyone has seen or heard anything. But aside from Georgia's screams moments before her death, they have nothing to go on. They plead with citizens to provide any information that can lead to an arrest.
No one could have imagined that this is just the beginning.
3 men were found shot, 2 dead in downtown Phoenix.
In the wake of so many killings, the community was just on razor's edge.
If the citizens of Phoenix were scared before, they're absolutely terrified now.
Disturbing crimes are happening around Phoenix, Arizona. Women have been sexually assaulted and 1 murdered, and several people have been shot, randomly targeted at night, along with several dogs and horses. Using ballistic evidence, police have discovered that the same gun is used in both the David Estrada murder and the animal killings. It appears they have a serial shooter on their hands. Over the next few weeks, more incidents occur. Sexual assaults and robberies are becoming commonplace. Shortly before 10 p.m., a dog named Shep is killed. And another named Irving is shot and wounded by a .22 caliber rifle within a few blocks of each other, just north of Camelback Road in Glendale.
One of the major differences between being able to compare a .22 caliber bullet casing from that of a shotgun, for example, a 410, is that a .22 caliber casing can be matched to the firearm that actually shot it. This is very difficult, almost impossible to do with a shotgun shell.
As the canine body count rises, so too does the human count.
Nathaniel Schaffner went to a convenience store one night. He walked over, and as he walked away from the convenience store, got a few blocks away, he came upon a scene where there was a car pulled over in a dark street, and there was a gun coming out of the window, and the barrel of this gun was pointing at a stray dog that was innocently capering about the scene, trying to find something to eat. Nathaniel came up to the car and, in an angry way, said a lot of things to stop them from shooting the dog. Don't shoot that dog. So what happened? The men in the car shot Nathaniel instead. Sometime later, an off-duty police officer was coming home from a social occasion with his wife late at night, and as he turns down the street, his headlights light up a man laying in the street with liquid all around him. He thinks what anyone would think, this is a man who's passed out, and that's beer. And he didn't have all his equipment with him, didn't have his uniform. He didn't feel like he was the right person to handle it, but he did call it in. Paramedics arrived, and they leaned over Nathaniel Schaffner, and they said, "Oh, this isn't beer, this is blood." So Nathaniel Schaffner died protecting a stray dog.
At 6 p.m., 39-year-old Tina Washington is attacked and killed.
Even by a veteran cop's standards, it was a terrible scene.
A witness who manages to hide behind a steel door
but the man in his terror was unable to give them a good description. That crime scene was very valuable to police because they found a shell casing. But the savvy detectives there at the scene noticed that she seemed to have no jewelry. Turns out that Tina Washington had what was called a mother's ring. That was gone. One of the sons told police that was missing.
Police wondered if these killings might be connected, changing weapons for different scenarios. For example, using a handgun when he's on foot, or when he's in his car using a rifle or a shotgun. But this all changes on December 29th, 2005.
At 7 p.m., the shooting starts. First, it's a bartending school, but no one is hurt. Then, at 10:10 p.m., a dog is killed while being walked by its owner in a park. 20 minutes later, Jose Ortiz is killed on North 10th Avenue in Phoenix, and Marco Carrillo is shot and killed 1 block away. At 11:39 p.m., Timothy Torde is shot in the neck and wounded nearby. Shortly after midnight, 2 dogs are shot and killed on East Granada. A German Shepherd is also killed on North 32nd Street. At 2:15 a.m., an off-duty Marine is shot and wounded.
I think you could say the official start of the serial shooter case was December 29th, 2005. This is when 3 men were found shot, 2 dead in downtown Phoenix. And the detective working that case the next morning got a call from a detective from a tiny little police department in a tiny little town adjacent to Phoenix who said, I have an unsolved case from earlier in the year. This sounds an awful lot like your case last night.
Overwhelmed with bodies and ballistics, detectives soon make a startling discovery. All of the victims of the drive-by rifle shootings are males and animals, and all of their handgun victims are female.
This changes everything. It's definitely a breakthrough in their investigation.
Could there be 2 active serial killers on the loose, both operating at the same time?
We were hearing police say serial killer, not serial killer. Oh, it's a rapist, it's this, it's that. We didn't know what was going on. If you were just a regular person not privy to everything that was happening inside the police department, you didn't know what was going on. All you knew is that you were frightened.
If the citizens of Phoenix were scared before, they're absolutely terrified now. Anything and anyone could be next.
Starting in early summer of 2005, a reign of terror has been waged over the residents of metropolitan Phoenix, Arizona. On the fateful night of December 29th, 2005, a rampage leaves 2 men dead, along with several other dogs and a wounded ex-Marine. All shot with either a .22 caliber rifle or a .410 shotgun from a passing vehicle. While these instances occur in a similar pattern, at the same time, a serial predator is haunting the areas around Baseline Road. These crimes are done on foot, using a handgun. With already 7 instances, including robbery, rape, and murder, the profiles of the separate instances indicate their worst fears. 2 separate serial killers are at work in Arizona.
Now the police are dealing with what are believed to be 2 active serial killers. They need to work around the clock to try to catch them. They decided to break the unit into 2 groups. One dedicated to catching who they called the serial shooter. The other group was dedicated to catching who they called the baseline rapist. The baseline rapist came to be known as the baseline killer because the victims were killed in the area of Baseline Road.
Authorities discover evidence that could further the Baseline killer case.
It's a gunshot fired off by the rapist to scare away onlookers that conclusively ties the assaults and robberies to the murders. Police are able to match the casings to the .38.
The rapist murderer was doing everything in his power to prevent any DNA evidence from showing up at his crime scenes, from attempting to use condoms, to making the victims rub their saliva with dirt and then rubbing it over their own bodies to basically pollute any DNA that he may have left on them.
But for as carefully as he tries to cover his tracks, the Baseline killer soon slips up. Detectives are able to recover DNA evidence from one of the previous sexual assaults. Now they have a lead. But as much as detectives learn over the course of their investigation, in 2006, his pace of assaults picks up. 18 separate attacks take place, which are all attributed to the baseline killer. That number rises to 23 over the next several months.
February 2006 proved to be a very bloody and terrible time. 2 women, hardworking women working in a food truck, Romelia Vargas and Myrna Palma Roman. These 2 women were found brutally murdered early one morning inside their food truck. And then March comes along, and another one of those headline-grabbing, gut-punching stories. You had 2 young workers at a Yoshi's restaurant, George Chow and Lilian Sanchez. They were closing down. These 2 young people murdered by what was now identified, and police were looking for the serial rapist and murderer. And shortly after that, a woman named Sofia Nunez was found dead in her bathtub, found by her young son, who was worried about his mom when she didn't come to school to pick him up.
The community is at wit's end, dealing with seemingly weekly events of new deaths and assaults. Authorities make pleas to the public to come forward if they know anyone or anything that could lead them to the killers.
The officers in the community feel helpless because the people that they're sworn to protect are being targeted. All they can do at this point is hope that they collect enough evidence fast enough to bring the case to a conclusion.
Meanwhile, the so-called serial shooter hasn't struck since that fateful December 29, 2005 night. And police still haven't been able to get a description of the shooter's car. It could be anyone. The summer of fear starts when Claudia Gutierrez Cruz is shot and killed on May 2nd with a shotgun.
She'd gone in for an extra shift as a glass stacker at a restaurant in Scottsdale because she thought they might need extra help because there had been sort of a strike that night. And they said, you know what, I think we got it covered, you can go. And she came home on the bus, but the connecting bus, it was too late. So she had to walk where the further bus left her off, all the way to her apartment. And she died.
That same night, 17-year-old Kabili Tambadu is shot and wounded.
He had been sent to the store that night to pick up some milk at the convenience store, so that's why he was on the sidewalk that night. And he was shot in the back, and the 17-year-old boy who's made it all the way to America from a very troubled, traumatic background from a war-torn country in Africa, Sierra Leone, staggers from the sidewalk through the bushes into the marble floors of a hotel and drips blood with him across their marble floors and asks for help.
Over the next 2 months, the carnage holds the city hostage. During this shooting spree, 2 Walmarts are set ablaze. Adding to the general carnage that Phoenix residents are dealing with, little do police know that these fires will be key later.
It was really scary living in the Phoenix area at that time because you had 2 serial killers working at the same time. I personally am unaware of that happening, at least not commonly anywhere before. Employers were putting up flyers, do not go to your car alone. People stopped jogging, all of this, because it was just too frightening. And, with good reason. People were dying and being maimed and traumatized. It was horrifying.
Detectives set up a tip line in the hopes of gaining vital information that will help them capture the serial shooter. And they get no shortage of calls, straining their resources as they try to make sense of all the leads. And just when people start thinking it can't get any worse, it does. The baseline killer strikes again, but this time for all to see.
Then along comes June 29th, the summer of 2006. A young woman named Carmen Miranda is washing her car. Not only do they get their first sort of look at this guy, they get their eyes on the body of this guy. And as shocking as anything, was just the violence and the speed of the attack. It visually confirmed what all of these other crime scenes had told police, that this was really just a ferocious, scary predator, because he set upon this woman with such speed and such force, threw her into the car, drove her off, sexually assaulted her, killed her. Her body found a short time later. In the wake of so many killings at this point, the community was just on razor's edge.
But authorities won't have time to rest. Another killer is on the loose. And July 1st, he strikes again. This time wounding Diane Bien and Jeremy Ortiz in 2 separate instances that night. With so many shootings, how can there be no witnesses?
One of the most effective things about the serial shooter style of mayhem was they took people from behind and people who weren't expecting to be assaulted. And this is why they had very little witness testimony, because people are just walking down the street and they get shot from behind and they never see what happened.
27-year-old Ashley Armenta is walking down the street when the assault happens.
When Ashley came into the hospital that night and they picked out the pellets from her scalp and police interviewed her, Ashley knew a lot about cars in general. She knew all about the model, make, year, everything. So she had a good idea of what the car was.
A light blue 1998 Toyota Camry. Despite other victims' descriptions, Ashley's is the first definitive answer to make and model of the vehicle.
One thing that was difficult for police is that when they did get a description of the car, people reported different colors. The paint on that particular car showed different in different light. It had different mixtures of paint in it, and different ones, purple, blue, gray, showed up in different light. So that explained why the color seemed different to different people.
Then, just a few days later, more carnage on the 12th of July, when Raul Lopez Garcia is shot while riding his bike in Mesa. Just when they could use a break in the serial shooter's case, a lead comes in. A phone call that will change the course of the investigation. There are 2 active serial killers on the loose in Phoenix, Arizona. The serial shooter shoots unsuspecting pedestrians and cyclists, while the baseline killer commits rapes and murders, centering his attacks largely on and around Baseline Road.
The crimes that were committed by this serial shooter were very senseless. You couldn't put a motive to it. Who was going to shoot someone's dog at the end of the leash that they're walking? Who was going to shoot a horse in someone's backyard? Who was going to shoot a guy sitting on a bus bench? Who was going to shoot a guy trying to protect a dog? These are senseless. A rape case is very specific. The motivation is obvious.
The serial shooter victims have all been shot with a .22 caliber rifle or a 410 or 12-gauge shotgun from a moving vehicle identified as the late 90s Camry. The baseline killer uses a handgun.
With video evidence recovered from the previous attack of the baseline killer, police are able to release a composite sketch to the public. He appears in the video to be an African-American male.
The informant that really broke the case of the serial shooter was a man named Ron Horton. And Ron Horton was an old drinking buddy of Sam Deaton.
Sam was from the Midwest. He was from Minnesota, where he grew up, and his mother at times had come out here to Phoenix. As an adult, he became a union electrician, so he could work a good job, but he had trouble with his temper and his reliability, so he lost his union job. Ron Horton wasn't the kind of guy who watched news or read newspapers, so he wasn't really aware very much of the whole serial shooter crisis in the area. But one night, he was at a bar with his friend Sam, and Sam said the strangest thing to him. He said, "Have you ever killed a man?"
Sammy apparently was one of those kind of guys when he got a belly full of beer, he shot his mouth off too much, and apparently had boasted to Ron that he had shot people.
Ron says, "No, what are you talking about?" And he noted this and thought this was really odd. Later, he did become aware of the serial shooter case, and in fact, a picture of Sam was circulated on the news from the Walmart fire. In June of 2006 was a bad month and a particularly bad night. There was a Walmart that was set on fire in the west side of the valley. One thing about Walmart is it has really good asset management, really good security. So they have cameras all throughout their stores. So the night of those two fires, they had people reviewing the video from every single camera, and they were able to determine that two guys probably set both fires, and they were able to take stills from the video, supply those to the police, which had them circulated on media. So now we had a picture of two guys with a distinctive tattoo and a distinctive t-shirt circulating for people to possibly recognize them. And Ron was fearful that maybe Sam was the guy in the picture, but he was divided because in his social circle, you don't snitch. And he felt really bad about maybe getting Sam into some trouble for no reason.
Ron didn't immediately act on this, and I think, as he would say himself, to his great regret. But in short order, after Ron had been told by Sam of the killings, a young woman named Robin Blasnick ends up being shot and killed in Mesa, Arizona. All the earmarks of the serial shooter.
Robin Blasnick was killed on the last day of July, and it was a fever pitch. I think everyone really felt electrified by Robin because she was such a vulnerable young girl that everyone felt like she was their daughter, their sister, and we thought we can't take any more of this.
Ron Horton hears about the killing of Robin Blasnick. He thinks about his friend Sam Dietman talking about going around killing people. At that point, Ron Horton calls police and says, I think my friend Sam Dietman had something to do with this. Police then ask Horton to set up a meeting with Sammy Dietman. They meet at a place called the Stardust Inn, a little bar on the west side. Police set up a surveillance, and they wait for Sam Dietman to show up.
They asked Ron to particularly tell Sam that he could not give him a ride home, that he'd have to have someone come pick him up. They waited till Ron left, and Sam was waiting for his ride, and they saw this car drive up and pick up Sam, and it sure looked like the other guy in the photo.
A guy named Del Hausner. And that is the first time cops had the name Del Hausner, but one of the lead investigators say he was sitting in that parking lot, and when he saw that Camry pull in, he said, we got our guys.
Dale had 2 marriages under his belt. He moved on with other girlfriends, and he now had a little baby daughter with another woman. He was working for the city of Phoenix at the airport as a janitor.
Dale also works as a boxing photojournalist. He loves to feel like he's in the middle of big things.
From the moment Sam was picked up that night at the bar, those 2 men were never alone. They had a tale for the next 3 days of their lives.
They have a GPS monitoring device on Hausner's car, and Sam and Dale are just driving around aimlessly with cops following them.
The 2 men continue driving around Phoenix under police surveillance.
So they observed the car slowing down when there was a lone pedestrian. And so their strategy to prevent someone getting shot while they were watching was to speed up and get close and act like they were going to witness it, because they didn't have any way of stopping a shooting. They followed them back to an apartment in Mesa. And they had an emergency meeting with the county attorney to get an emergency warrant to do a bug in the apartment.
They went to the apartment next door, put up a monitoring device so they could listen to their audio.
They have a lot of surveillance on the apartment, and at one point they have Sam come out and take a trash bag from inside the apartment to the dumpster. One of the guys who's been hiding in the bushes jumps into the dumpster and pulls out that trash bag, and they hightail it down to downtown Phoenix to go through the bag. And what they find in it is further confirmation that they have the right guys. They find a map that's marked up with the sites of the murders. They have a soda can, pick it up, it rattles, dump it out. What's in there? A .410 shell.
The police want to make a move, But there's a problem. An unexpected person is at the apartment with them.
A complication has come up, and that is that during the time of the surveillance, Dale has picked up a very small child, about 2 years old, and brought it home with him. This is his own daughter, it turns out. And what was really awful on the tapes of the bug, they hear Dale teaching his daughter just to laugh about the killings.
Good night, Sam. Night. See you in the morning. See you in the morning. Hey, don't kill anybody.
They can't do a raid with a baby inside there, so now they have to regroup. What are they going to do?
Anytime officers gather for the purpose of doing a forceful entry to execute a search warrant or effect an arrest of a suspect, they would have to do a risk assessment. They would have to do surveillance on the property to determine if the subject that they're looking for is present and who else may be present, and that would include the presence of children. And they would have to weigh very carefully whether or not it was worth taking the risk that an innocent child may be injured in order to continue their investigation at that point. If officers determine that a child is present and there is a person of interest or a suspect who may be armed and dangerous in that location, most often we would expect that they would continue the investigation, continue surveillance, and attempt to make that arrest at a time where there's less risk to innocent people.
But can this tactic work until they lawfully arrest the killers? Arizona resident Ron Horton has just heard some disturbing news. A longtime drinking buddy, Sam Dietman, has boasted that he and his friend may be the serial shooters. Ron has no choice but to let police know. Now, police are following Sam and his friend Dale Hausner, who are cruising around in a vehicle that matches the description given by witnesses to belong to the serial shooter. Police rushed to get the necessary warrants together to bring the two men down.
So this was a very harrowing night for the cops. And they also had a helicopter overhead that was observing them. And when someone on the ground could not get close enough to the car to prevent a potential shooting, they actually had the helicopter buzz the car, fly low, so that the shooters would look up and go, oh, better not do it right now.
I know that one of the investigators who was there that night following this said it was one of the worst nights of his life because he felt as if he was following two known killers who were looking for another victim, and the police still needed to do their investigation, and their biggest concern was they were going to pull a gun out the window, and before the police could interact or intervene, another victim was going to go down.
After 2 days of surveillance and everything is in its place and the circumstances that are necessary have presented themselves, it's time to bring this nightmare that is the serial shooter to an end.
Once they identified these guys and got the audio from the neighboring apartment and all the evidence, they rounded these two guys up and hauled them downtown and booked them.
The things they find inside the apartment are telling. There are guns, ammunition, and even a scrapbook of news clippings following the investigation of the serial shooter and the baseline killer.
When police executed the raid at the Mesa apartment of Dale Hausner, they found a treasure trove of information, including a whole slew of weapons, I believe about a dozen firearms. They ended up doing, I think, most of the last shootings with a shotgun. They found a shotgun and shells and casings and all kinds of ammunition. So, they were not wanting for evidence in terms of firearms and ballistics.
Police search Hausner's car and find even more evidence that Hausner and Dietman are indeed the serial shooters that have plagued the Phoenix area for the past year. The city is elated, but Dale Hausner refuses to take responsibility for the murders.
You guys have never been together doing anything violent together?
No way. No. As far as I know, no, it's not. As far as I know, it's absolutely not. No, as far as any violence with us together, no.
But Sam Dietman has a different version of events.
We had heading up, I don't know what that goes, 32nd or 44th Street or something. So he's like, well, sit back. I'm like, all right, why? And the window starts going down. bought this little shotgun, fired at some fat guy who was walking down the road.
I think you're the mastermind of this entire operation, and have been from the get-go. But you involved Sam, and I think he was willing to go along.
He's shooting people, it's not with me.
No, it is with you.
Dale promptly held himself a news conference, which was a great spectacle. Dale Hausner wanted very much to be a talk show host or a circus ringleader. And a very flamboyant character, loved to talk.
On August 7th, 2006, Hausner goes public with a press conference declaring his innocence.
Why I'm here is because I have Sam Dietman staying with me for about 5 weeks. And apparently at night, Sam had been taking my car out and using various weapons that I have in my house to commit crimes. And apparently they tracked it through my car. And when they came and busted in the house, I was there. And I guess I'm just guilty by association, even though I did not shoot anybody or kill anybody.
Dale Hausner could be what is described as a classic narcissist. He refuses to accept any responsibility. He's self-focused. He lacks empathy.
I mean, it could be anybody. I mean, I don't know, but the person's got to be smart, you know, I mean, because they've been getting away with this for a long time.
Just over a month later, the citizens of Phoenix, Arizona are handed another arrest. With DNA evidence from one of the rapes, in conjunction with the ring taken from Tina Washington's body and traces of her blood found on one of his shoes, the baseline killer is identified as ex-con and current construction worker Mark Goudreau. He is convicted of 9 murders among 90 charges. He is sentenced to 438 years in his first trial for rape and robbery, and finally to death on March 16, 2007. In the face of his crimes, Sam Dietman confesses to his involvement with the serial shooting and agrees to testify against Dale Hausner.
He flipped so quickly that night because I think he was not only tired of the crime spree, but I think he was tired of Dale. So when the police arrested the both of them, it was Sam's opportunity to get out from under the thumb of Dale and just get away from all of it, all the crimes and Dale.
Dale Hausner goes to trial on October 6, 2008. In a desperate attempt to get the audio evidence thrown out, Hausner's lawyer goes after the emergency wiretaps issued without a judge's permission. But the state prosecutor takes the stand to defend police's actions.
They had followed this vehicle. They were making wide U-turns. They were stopping at empty lots and behaving in a manner as if they might be casing various areas looking for people. I felt that it was necessary to act promptly to stop the killing.
Despite the defense's concerns, the recordings are played for all present to hear, and what the court hears is shocking.
They heard these two guys, these two knuckleheads, talking about news coverage and yucking it up about shooting people.
Oh my God, she looks familiar. Oh, Blasek? I know what Blasek.
They were mocking the death throes of their victims. They were congratulating each other on getting a higher number of murders.
It's now bringing their total to 6. That's higher than that.
The state has heard enough. Dale Hausner is sentenced.
Of the 87 charges brought against Hausner, he's convicted of 80.
Despite appeals in 2008 and 2012, the convictions are upheld against Dale Hausner.
Dale was a wannabe. Boxing promoter, big guy, man about town. Even as a serial killer, he wanted to be a big-timer. There was never a moment where Dale said, I did this, and I'm sorry. Those are the kind of statements that may actually mean something to victims. Dale never had the fortitude to do that.
On June 19, 2013, Dale Hausner commits suicide by overdosing on antidepressants in his jail cell.
Phoenix is a pretty mobile city. A lot of people move in, a lot of people move out. The fact is, the people who are new here didn't know who he was, didn't really care. And those of us who did know, we already knew we were safe from him. You want to do a big dramatic gesture and kill yourself? knock yourself out. Who cares? You're irrelevant now. And I think that is the worst possible hell Dale could have, is not to be important anymore.
Now, over 15 years later, the reign of terror and the summer of fear is a distant memory. The people of these communities have moved on and rebirthed themselves in the Valley of the Sun. Even the quietest towns have their secrets to hide. A neighborhood full of family doesn't mean it's always safe.
There's blood on the bed. He's struggling to stuff out of his mouth.
The first thing I think they noticed when they were walking up where the guns lined up along the sidewalk.
Robinson Police. The police found when they arrived what looked like a burglary situation.
No lie stays hidden forever, and the evidence always finds the truth. Just south of Waco, Texas, is the small suburban area of Robinson.
Robinson is a suburb of Waco, and just your quintessential bedroom community, as the people call them. Very close-knit.
The two cities are right together. It's basically a residential area with some shops and a little bit of business.
You have the small town feel, but close enough to a bigger town with bigger amenities in it.
A lot of good folks live there. Small school, very tight-knit community.
But even the smallest towns can have their dark side.
Robinson 911, what's your emergency? Hello? Okay, what's the problem? I got it this morning. I was in my son's room because I didn't sleep. I go over there with my husband's guns. They're all gone. And there's blood on the bed, and he is struggling all the stuff out of his mouth. Okay, so he is there? He's here. Stay on the line with me. Hang on one second. I'm going to dispatch officers. Stay on. I do have officers in and out. You don't see anybody. I mean, like there's nobody around or anything, do you? I don't see anything. Just that door was wide open. I went back there, turned on the fan, and I shut the door, and then I heard the door off. Just now? I can't really respond to me. But he is breathing? I can see it.
In the morning hours of around 6 o'clock, a woman named Gentry called in to 911 and said that her husband had a gunshot wound in the head and blood all over.
The police are quick to arrive on the scene, showing up even before Darlene gets off the phone with the 911 operator.
Robinson Police.
I'm sorry, what?
The police found when they arrived what looked like a burglary situation. Mr. Gentry was in bed, and he had received a gunshot wound to the head.
With nothing else left to do, Darlene Gentry is left to wait and hope that her husband Keith will survive.
Darlene and Keith Gentry were a young married couple with children living in city limits of Robinson, Texas. She was a homecoming queen at Cameron, a city near Waco. Keith and she met at Texas State Technical Institute, a school, and they dated off and on while they were in school, and then both of them got out and left.
She went up to Dallas, but then moved back, and they continued dating and finally got married. They, in pretty short order, had 3 children.
Keith was a hard-working guy. Worked for a drafting company. He lived near his folks, a very close-knit family.
Keith's father, Wayman, said that Keith didn't appear to be very happy, and that he was going to stick it out with her, but it seemed like that they were having difficulties.
Darlene originally studies to be a dental assistant and moves to Dallas to work for a dentist. But after an incident where her car is stolen, she decides to move back home and goes back to school to get a nursing degree.
You know, the fact that she was a homecoming queen, she was an exceptionally attractive young woman.
Keith proposes to Darlene in 1999, and their wedding is soon after. As their lives together in marriage truly begin, they move into a house next door to Keith's parents. In the early morning of November 9th, 2005, Darlene is the first in her house to stir. She wakes up in one of her children's rooms after spending the night trying to help them sleep by watching movies together.
The children were sick, that she had been staying with them during the night, and that she got up early in the morning and started going around the house, and the back door was open, and that Keith's guns were missing.
Darlene races from the open gun cabinet to find Keith, all the while calling out his name.
And so then she went into the bedroom and found her husband, Keith, lying there with blood and a bullet wound in his head.
When Darlene finds her husband mortally wounded in their bed, she calls 911 for help.
911, much emergency. There's blood on the bed and she is struggling.
Police arrive at the scene within minutes. Immediately upon reaching the house, things start to look off.
Go check the inside. Go check the guy. Watch yourself going in. We've got a lot of guns here in the front yard. Robinson Police.
I'm sorry, what?
Stand right here and just keep scanning. Don't let anybody near them guns.
Well, the first thing I think they noticed when they were walking up were the guns lined up along the sidewalk.
Keith Gentry had several hunting-type weapons, long guns, shotguns, rifles, and they were kind of out in the grass in the front yard, and they were kind of lined up in rows. And there wasn't but about maybe 5 or 6 of these.
Keith is in critical condition and is treated as the first priority before any investigation into the scene can begin.
This is not a high-crime area by any stretch of the imagination. And to make that point even more profound is that where they lived in particular is surrounded by family, almost like a family compound. And none of what we were being told about the crime scene made sense.
Keith is taken to the hospital. Every second could mean the difference between life and death.
The gun case was open, but it was unlocked with a key.
When doing an inventory of the guns, found out that one was in fact missing. That didn't match anything that they had ever seen about a robbery.
It just did not sound to the Robinson Police Department like she was as concerned.
They called and said that Keith was not doing well, that maybe she needed to get to the hospital.
In the small suburb of Robinson, Texas, residents feel safe and secure in their tight-knit community. On an early November morning, the Gentry family learns that tragedy can strike anywhere, even when surrounded by family. Darlene Gentry wakes up to find her back door open and gun cabinet empty. She fears a burglar has gotten into her house in the night. Darlene finds her husband Keith in their bed, barely holding on to his life, with a bullet wound in his head. She calls 911, but can Keith survive?
Keith Gentry was transported to the hospital. The police then talked to Darlene and asked her to come down to the headquarters with them.
Darlene is brought to the police station to give her statement about the events of the morning.
Just as a matter of routine, Darlene was taken to the Robinson Police Department where she was being interviewed by police detectives.
Saw the blood on the sheets. Was there any weapons on the bed?
I honestly saw nothing other than just the foam coming out of his mouth, and I tried to shake him. When I tried to shake him, that's when I noticed something by his head, and I kind of leaned in more to look, and that's when I went to hollering at the kids, get out, get out, get out.
What did you see?
I just saw the red, and I automatically assumed it was blood just because, and so that's when I started calling, and it was just like I don't know.
While Keith is taken to the hospital and Darlene is interviewed, the police investigate the scene of the crime, on the lookout for any evidence of the burglary.
When the Robinson police detectives arrived, they called in the Texas Rangers.
Her story, of course, was it was a robbery. There was no evidence of a break-in. She said the guns had been stolen. There was no evidence that the gun case had been broken into, and nothing else was taken. And then to find the firearms stacked rather neatly on the lawn in front of the house that didn't match anything that they had ever seen about a robbery.
Did you at any time touch him?
Well, I know I physically did. Like I shook his leg when I was trying to get his attention, but phone's in my pocket. I just turned it off.
The reason I asked is we got some rangers at the house, some Texas Rangers. They're assisting with the crime scene stuff. They found what they think might be blood in the bathroom sink.
I don't know. As I said, I haven't, other than touching his leg, that is the only part I believe I touched of him.
So you don't remember going after touching maybe any bloody area?
No, I was literally, my cell phone was on my dresser, which is on his side of the bed. When I couldn't get him to respond to me, I turned directly from there, picked up the phone, and turned it on, and then of course had to wait for the service to hit and hit 911.
The gun case was open, but it was unlocked with a key.
As authorities make their way through the house, questions about Darlene's story begin to percolate in their minds. And it isn't only the evidence found around the house that has them wondering.
The officers, in their experience, even people with no medical training, try to at least do something to help a wounded spouse or a person. She had done nothing. She gave a story that she was probably in shock or something like that, but the fact that she did nothing was very suspicious to them.
Is Darlene too in shock to help her husband? Or could her inaction be a sign that something else is going on?
Keep in mind, a 911 operator is going to want her to do CPR because that's just how they're trained to do. And keeping also in mind that Darlene was a registered nurse at the time. But in order to properly do CPR, you have to pull someone off the bed because you cannot adequately do CPR in bed. You need to have a hard surface. But she never did that. She spoke to the dispatcher, the 911 operator, about how he was making a gurgling sound, and it just did not sound to the Robinson Police Department like she was as concerned or as frantic as what a normal spouse might have been when they found their husband dead in bed.
The search continues through the house, but as hard as they try, police can't find definitive evidence of any break-in having occurred.
I don't recall how long we had been there, but we'd been there quite a while because we were having to go from room to room. We have to search and look, and we were looking for fingerprints. We were looking for all evidence that might have bolstered what the wife had told us about the burglary, but we just could not find it.
That was my partner again.
The detective I've got at the hospital said that they need the wife there to make some medical decisions on behalf of your husband. Okay, so what I'm going to do, if you'll just bear with me just a few more minutes, I'm going to get you to the hospital until I can sort through what's going on. Noreen, you listening to me?
Yes, I'm listening.
Everyone's a suspect right now until I can determine how your husband suffered this gunshot wound. That's not to take away that he could have done it himself. You understand this? If there was a gun on that bed, you moved it to save his integrity or anything like that, I need to know now.
I did not move a gun.
Did you harm your husband?
No, I did not harm my husband.
You and I have been working, we've built a pretty good relationship here. You know, I'm trying to figure out what happened.
I know.
That's all I'm trying to do right now.
Darlene was in the middle of her initial police interview down at the police station, and they called and said that Keith was not doing well, and maybe she needed to get to the hospital.
Darlene's interview isn't over, but the police put it on hold after news of Keith's condition reaches the station.
They received a message from the hospital that her husband Keith was brain dead, and then took her to the hospital, and she signed the paperwork so that he would not be kept on life support.
Darlene is given time to sign the paperwork and say her goodbyes. But after things conclude at the hospital, she is brought back to the police department to continue her interview.
I'm just not doing this alone because I'm just...
Are you saying that you want to get an attorney?
Yes. My sisters are having a fit. They don't want me signing anything.
They continued to talk with her later in the day, and she began to feel that she was being interrogated, and eventually invoked her right to cease the interrogation and leave.
I'm just afraid that I'm going to get, I'm trying to tell y'all exactly what I remember, and as I said, it's been a long day.
Sure.
And
I understand.
I don't want me trying to tell y'all something to turn around and it come out not exactly what I meant and basically bite me in the butt. Basically, is what I don't want to happen.
We wouldn't let that happen to you, because if there's something we don't understand that you've said, we're going to ask you.
And I've tried to be straightforward and honest with everything that I'm telling y'all. And what I don't know, I'm telling you, I don't know.
Darlene Gentry wakes up early on a November morning. She finds the door open and the gun cabinet unlocked. She races to her husband Keith, but finds him shot in their bed. Keith is rushed to the hospital, but it isn't enough. When Darlene is told that he has been left brain dead, she signs off on removing him from life support. The Texas Rangers are brought in to investigate the burglary, but details aren't matching up. And when Darlene starts to feel interrogated, she asks for a lawyer and leaves the police station. Before Darlene gets back from the police station, the investigation in and around her home continues.
We did believe that one handgun was missing, and we searched for the handgun. We could not find it.
Later, when doing an inventory of the guns, found out that one of his guns was in fact missing. It was a .22 caliber 9-shot revolver. That was the only firearm in the house that could not be accounted for.
Police are able to talk to Keith's father to get more insight into the guns found in the front yard, confirming the missing gun's existence.
The father had given the gun to Keith, knew that he had it, and so they were able to make the determination that that gun was missing.
Meanwhile, one officer makes a very lucky discovery inside the house.
We assisted the Robinson Police Department with the examination of the crime scene, and through this investigation, One of the key pieces of evidence found by Robinson Police Detective Mike Noel was as he was going through the kitchen trash can, he found a latex surgical glove.
The police requested that she would give them permission to search her house, which she did. And they found a latex glove similar to what a nurse would wear. And inside the glove was a .22 caliber shell that would have fit the revolver.
Now keep in mind, this glove was turned inside out as if it was being worn at the time when the shell casing was picked up. Turned inside out and then placed at the bottom of the trash can. And then what looked like a bunch of leftover food was piled on top of it, as if to hide the surgical glove and the shell casing.
The glove was taken to the crime lab along with the shell. They did DNA on it, and the DNA on the glove matched the DNA of Darlene Gentry. The glove was subsequently tested for gunshot residue, and it was found on it. Interestingly, the defense attorneys asked for that test to be run on it.
As for the bullet shell, firearms experts are able to confirm that the shell would come from the missing .22 caliber revolver. Although without the gun in question, there can be no way of connecting the two beyond it being just a possibility.
There was an autopsy done. The bullet was recovered from his head. The bullet was so badly damaged that they were not able to match it to the gun as far as being fired from the gun, but it was a .22 bullet and consistent with what could have been fired from that gun.
Between the lack of evidence of a burglary having taken place and the shell found in the latex glove, suspicion grows in Darlene's direction. But for some police officers, these suspicions begin much sooner.
Something stinks about this, Gary. I think she did it. Something ain't right here, man. I'm telling you.
Okay, what's the problem? I got it this morning. I was in my son's room because I didn't sleep. My back door was open. My husband's guns are all gone.
The interesting thing about the call was that was the order that everything was described to the 911 operator. Normally, if a person comes in and finds their spouse, mortally wounded, that's the first thing they're going to tell the operator. My husband is badly hurt. We need an ambulance out here. And instead, she went through this long scenario about walking around the house and the guns being missing, and the last thing that she got to was about her husband. And that made everybody very suspicious. It sounded like she was setting up an alibi in her call.
Oh, by the way, my husband's been shot. So it's almost like we call it in the newspaper business, she kind of buried the lead. But it appeared to the investigators early on that she was trying to set up her alibi, or, she went way in too much detail before she actually said, "Oh, my husband's been shot."
If Darlene could be responsible, there is still the question of why hanging in the air.
Keith and Darlene did have some financial problems. There were apparently other problems in the marriage as well. Keith had a fairly large insurance policy. I believe he may have actually had two of them, and it was in the area, I believe, of several $100,000.
You mentioned y'all were trying to save some money. Have y'all been having some financial problems?
Well, we're just, this third kid, and it's killing us, basically. So we've just been trying to butt heads, figure out which way, because, of course, we are getting behind on some bills, and it's just been one thing after another.
Police are able to uncover that Keith is under 2 life insurance policies. Together, they are worth approximately $750,000.
Darlene Gentry's behavior continued to be confusing. She started looking for land to purchase. And she was looking in an area of the county that was about as far away as you could get and still be inside the county. And it wasn't her home. It wasn't where she was used to living. It was a very rural area, and it would have been a long drive for her to go to work every day. But she was dealing with one man who was selling a 5-acre tract of land.
Shortly after her husband's death, there was a gentleman named Pravelka who she had been friendly with and told him that she would like to move and was looking for a house. He had a house that next to it was a little pond, and she expressed a great deal of interest in the house and the pond, said that her husband had always liked to take the boys out to water sports, and that she thought it would really be nice to have this house with the pond.
Darlene realized it had a pond on it, and she said, well, that's perfect, because Keith had always wanted a place with a pond so he could take his 3 sons fishing.
So they negotiated prices, and she would come out and look at the land from time to time, and she asked his permission, would it be okay if she spent a little time out there? He says, it's not a problem. Drive out and look at it anytime you like.
With the murder weapons still missing, there is no direct evidence to link anyone to the shooting of Keith Gentry. But as the circumstantial case continues to build, authorities believe Darlene is to blame. Nearly a month after Keith is shot, the police move to make an arrest.
I believe the crime occurred on November the 7th, and she was actually arrested November the 28th. Keith's father said they simply couldn't believe that she had done that.
Darlene Gentry told the man she wanted to buy the land, but she didn't want the pond anymore.
That kind of set in motion this scheme that the ranger had, that she would go back out there.
The rangers then had set up a camera on the pond so a video could be recorded of what was happening there.
When Keith Gentry is shot in the middle of the night, the police begin to suspect Darlene, his wife, may be responsible.
Something stinks about this, Gary. I think she did it.
While their suspicions begin early on, the lack of a clear motive and the missing murder weapon keep them from closing the case. Meanwhile, Darlene looks for a new place to make a home, telling friends her current house is too full of awful memories after the shooting. While searching the Gentry residence, police find a spent shell casing for a .22 hiding inside a latex glove with Darlene's DNA. An arrest warrant is finally permitted, and Darlene is brought into custody nearly a month after Keith's death. But Darlene's arrest is short-lived.
Well, after she was arrested, Wayman Gentry, Keith's father, said that they simply couldn't believe that she had done that, and they were supportive of her and even helped her raise bail money.
Keith's parents raised the $50,000 necessary to get Darlene out on bail. When released from jail, Darlene pushes forward on buying the land she'd been shown before her arrest, only now she has an unusual request.
At some point during their negotiation, Darlene Gentry told the man she wanted to buy the land, but she didn't want the pond anymore. And the man thought that was strange because in Texas, anyone who buys a piece of property, they want water on it. Water is a commodity in Texas. So he was very confused about this, but he knew that she had also been arrested. So he contacted law enforcement and said, this woman who was arrested for killing her husband wants to buy my property. She wanted this pond, talked about how it was something she always wanted, but now she wants me to fill it in with dirt. He said, do you reckon she threw something into that pond? Well, we interviewed the man who owned the land, and we agreed that her behavior was suspicious at best, And we asked the man if it would be all right if we came out and looked in the pond. So myself and Ranger Foster, we contacted the state dive team. We made arrangements for them to come out and search the bottom of this body of water. It wasn't large, but it was big enough that it needed to be searched correctly. The dive team never even had to suit up. They waded out into the water. They saw what looked like maybe a stick in the water. They walked over to that stick about knee deep. They reached down and they pulled out a .22 caliber pistol.
In fairly short order, he was able to find a 9-shot .22 caliber revolver there in the water.
Within only 10 to 15 minutes, the dive team are able to locate the assumed murder weapon within the pond.
To begin with, the pistol itself was pristine. It was not covered in dirt or moss. It had not been there very long, and that was plainly obvious to all involved. We showed the weapon to Mr. Gentry, Keith Gentry's father, and he was able to positively identify it as a weapon that he had given his son at some point in time. So we now know that this is most likely the weapon that was missing from the house and probably the murder weapon.
With the bullet removed from Keith being too damaged to have an absolute confirmation that it must have been fired from a particular gun, authorities are left with only circumstantial evidence to link the gun to the shooting. It's the only gun missing from the Gentry residence after the shooting, matches the caliber of the bullet, and appears to have only been recently disposed of. Having found the missing firearm in a place where the evidence points most clearly to Darlene, the idea of what must have happened on the night of the shooting crystallizes in the minds of police. With no evidence of a break-in actually having occurred, Darlene is the only one who appears to have had the means to have gotten to the guns. Darlene may have put most of the guns on the lawn to create confusion, and interest in the pond could potentially be due to a plan to dispose of the murder weapon. Even as police and Texas Rangers come up with what they believe must have happened, they still have nothing concrete to say Darlene has to have been involved.
And I came up with the idea to tell the landowner, to tell Miss Gentry, that he would be willing to fill in that pond with dirt, but that he would be afraid that he would get his tractor stuck. So he was going to use a pump and drain the water out first.
That kind of set in motion this scheme that the ranger had, and just to plain a hunch that she would go back out there and try to find a gun.
The rangers then had set up a camera on the pond so a video could be recorded of what was happening there.
6:06. We told her on one day, as I recall, and by the next day, about noon, she had driven out there by herself. We watched her put on rubber boots and reach into the back of her vehicle and get a probe of some sort. Then we turned the cameras on and watched her walk down the path to the pond, walk over to where the stick had been placed earlier, and start probing around in the water looking for something. And of course we knew what it was. She was looking for the weapon.
All of this was recorded, and her efforts to dig around in the pond with the stick were all videotaped and were absolutely on record.
With the video evidence of Darlene searching out the discarded pistol, the police have what they need to put this case to rest.
Robinson 911, what's emergency?
It all starts with a 911 call from a scared wife reporting a burglary and her husband being shot. But as the authorities look into her story, they discover how full of lies it truly is. When the probable murder weapon is found in a pond, a sting operation is put together to link Darlene to the crime. The sting works. and Texas Rangers have video evidence of Darlene trying to retrieve the gun.
Darlene's case went to trial in February 2007, and it was a high-profile case. Lots of people jammed the courtroom, a lot of friends and family on both sides, but mainly Keith's side. Darlene's mother was there.
The thing is, it was a circumstantial case. Nobody could point at her and say they had seen her shoot her husband, Keith Gentry. Anytime a case is circumstantial, you always have some concern, as a jury going to convict somebody if you don't have eyewitness testimony. We felt that we had a strong case. The 911 call just went against all human experience. Nobody goes through a convoluted story about getting up and walking around and things being stolen and then wandering into a bedroom.
I got up this morning, I was in my son's room because I didn't sleep. My back door was open, my husband's guns are all gone, and there's blood on the bed, and she is struggling.
Then and only then saying, my husband's got a bullet wound in his head. Our life experience says that when somebody finds their spouse terribly wounded, first thing they're going to do is call and say, my spouse is terribly hurt and I need an ambulance here as quickly as possible, which is exactly what she didn't do. Three things that were really strong for us and we felt confident about. The first was the lead-in, the 911 call. Then the fact that the missing gun was later found in the pond, and then she went out and was digging around trying to find it. How would she ever have known that the gun was there if she had not been the one that shot him and then concealed the gun and then later threw it in the pond?
Later, her explanation was that she heard a rumor that the gun was there, and she wanted to be the one to find it and turn it into the police to help them find the real killer.
The interesting part of that is that the defense never even cross-examined on the video. They didn't talk about it. They just pretty much acted like it didn't happen.
After laying out all the evidence of Darlene's guilt, the question of why she did it still remains unanswered.
We were never able to make a determination that the killing was to get the policy. If it had been determined that that was the motive for the killing, it would have been a capital murder and she would have been possibly facing the death penalty. But there was no evidence that that was the motive for the killing. As defense attorneys will frequently do, try to minimize everything that was negative toward her. They were trying to say that she was just sort of in shock at the house, and that's why she said what she did on the tape. Then with the gun, they played up, as we expected them to, that it was a circumstantial case, that no one had seen Darlene commit the crime. And then also, they tried to point the fingers somewhat at Pavelka and were trying to give the idea that maybe he's the one that had gotten hold of the gun and was trying to set her up for some reason.
After only 5 hours of deliberations, the jury reaches their conclusion. They find Darlene guilty of murder.
The final verdict in Darlene Gentry's trial was she was found guilty of the murder of her husband, Keith Gentry. She received about a 66 or so year sentence, and she's currently serving that sentence in state prison here in Texas.
Here in Texas, murder is a first-degree felony, and the punishment range is from 5 years to 99 years or life.
We believe that the verdict was just, and we believe that justice was served. Kind of a backstory to this is that she did not like the fact that we videotaped her looking for that weapon in that pond. It just wrecked her whole theory that she was an innocent victim also, and that she had nothing to do with this.
While Keith's parents don't want to believe at first that Darlene could be responsible for the death of their son, it is in part because of Keith's father identifying the gun that the case is able to be solved.
Through the course of seeing what the evidence was, they became convinced that she had, in fact, murdered their son. And, of course, they were very bitter, would be the right word about that. They wanted her to get the maximum, to be in prison, and also not to be able to have any contact with the grandchildren.
Keith's parents are given custody of their grandchildren after Darlene is found guilty.
She got exactly what she deserved. She took the life of a man who did nothing but love her. She took away the father of 2 little boys, and they took away the son to a mother and a father who loved him. And then they had invested their whole life into this family, Keith and Darlene. So she is where she needs to be, and she'll be there until she's not so pretty anymore.
We were, of course, satisfied. We were ourselves convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she was guilty, of course.
I think the community thought it was just. I mean, if you kill your husband while he's sleeping, that's a pretty cold thing to do, and you should go to prison for a long time for that.
I'll say this. This is the perfect example of how law enforcement can work when they work together. The fact that her DNA was found on a glove wrapped around a shell casing that belonged to the weapon that was found in the water, that's just good, solid police work on the part of Mike Noel, who took it upon himself to get his hands dirty and get inside a trash can. And without that, and without the video, Darlene Gentry might have gotten away with this.